now that we are onto them, if this attack is continuing or not.
That's right. It seems to have
It's
calmed down for
wild
now.
because that's what the Twitter files were about, right? I
Yep.
wonder if Elon actually caught wind and figured, or if someone caught wind. You did say anyone in here who, works for Twitter or in control of spaces, please try to figure out what's going on. And now since that call out, it seems like it's gotten better. But this is exactly what the files were about: is suppression, censorship, and their ability to be able to do this to us. And then here we are having it happen real time, not just one of us, but all of us who have started a space. I'm glad you started one, Kim, so you could see that you were getting muted as well, right? Was it popping up on your screen saying you have been muted as the host?
Yes, yes, several times now.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so someone DM'd me and said maybe the co-host is doing it. Let me assure you, the co-host does not have the ability to mute the host. Only the host has the ability to mute themselves. Co-host can only mute speakers.
Yeah. So someone with administrative access has the ability to mute you, right? I mean, that's just the ability because you want to stop people from having certain conversations. Say a bunch of terrorists pop up and they were having conversation. Yeah, you want to boot that channel and mute the people. But as hosts and co-hosts, we have no ability to do that. We can't mute either co-hosts or the host himself.
Exactly. This is wild. This is so crazy. I can't believe this is happening.
Yep.
Has anyone let Mario know that he wasn't alone?
Yeah. He knows.
Well, it's three spaces now, right? And it's always only the spaces with this topic, so it's just crazy.
Yep.
Correct. I'm wondering if they actually fixed it. I could try to co-host again if you want, but I don't know if you want to risk it.
Well, it seems to be fine now, so maybe this little call out that we made to Twitter has helped. Let's see. I mean, right now I'm not getting muted. You're not getting moved off stage. So hopefully it will be fine.
I hope so too. Glitches, quote unquote.
I know that the other day when, spaces were down because of whatever had gone down with the suspended accounts having access to speak on Twitter spaces, they were fixing some things. And, within an maybe half hour to an hour of me asking Elon if we could please get spaces back during the Twitter files drop, they were back and he thought it would be later in the night. So, I mean,
Yep.
I think they do have pretty quick recovery time in fixing these issues or figuring out where the source of the problem is. But I am really curious if we'll ever know if someone is actually tampering with the spaces behind the scenes, and specifically in regard to this, to Twitter files.
Well, I mean, the good thing is we've been calling it out. We've provided an analysis that it only affected spaces that were talking about Twitter Files 8, that everything else is running smooth. So either the people attacking, see that this is so obvious that it's just not worth it, or our call out to Twitter has helped, with people looking into that and trying to stop whatever is happening here. I haven't had any more problems now.
That's good.
It's running smooth. Let's observe this another couple of minutes, and then we can go dive back into the topic.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Um, Stephen, welcome back.
Hey, thanks, Kim. Uh, I missed the first round of all the problems you guys were having. I wasn't aware that was even happening. That is really wild, really wild.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I'm sorry when Kim brought it up in Mario Space, and again it was another thing that sort of got downplayed, like, oh no, this has happened no, it was specifically these topics that were causing it initially, and now again today. And to see other spaces just running just fine, and people from this space have gone to other spaces and reported back to me and said, yeah, these other spaces are fine, I just started a space, it's fine. It's pretty obvious that it's specific to this topic and the people speaking on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think we've established that, just by looking at other spaces that are running smoothly, right? And again, everyone can look at the
Yep.
spacesdashboard.com, and you can see there are other spaces that are running for hours without problems. So it's not a glitch in Twitter Spaces. This is specifically targeted against a space with this topic.
That's right. I'm eating
But
buffalo wings.
it seems to be fixed now. I mean, I feel, that whatever happened is not happening anymore.
Yeah, seems to be okay now.
So why don't we dive straight back in? Let me tell you what I know about NAFO, which is a CIA-funded government botnet.
Yep.
And Twitter Files 8 is basically all about that. So what I know about it, and I looked into it because when I started tweeting that the war in Ukraine is really a U.S. proxy war,
Yeah.
I got attacked by these NAFO bots, right?
Yeah.
And the way that works, it's a 3-tier system. In order to hide that it is a botnet, they are doing something that is quite new, and they're doing it to circumvent US regulation or laws that don't allow this kind of activity against Americans. And the way they are doing it is they have one group of people that are real people that are joining NAFO because they are pro-Ukraine. They have been introduced by other people
Adam
to the good
Kinzinger,
cause.
those types.
Yeah, so there's real people that believe what NAFO stands for, and they actually put the time in, and they participate in, shutting down people that are talking about peace or calling the war a proxy war. That's what they do. And then, so let's call it the legitimate front end.
Yeah.
Thousands of people that are organized under the NAFO banner working together, right? But then
Yep.
there is let's call it the illegal back end, which is the hundreds of thousands of accounts that are not real people that are being used to, amplify whatever NAFO does. So they are voting, they are liking tweets that are pro-Ukraine, and they are, doing malicious posting and replying on tweets of people that are not pro-Ukraine, that have a different view. Let's call those the real hardware software bots, right?
Yep.
But then there is another layer. For the first time, the intelligence community is allowed to participate themselves. So over 100,000 staff, and the intelligence community is quite large. I mean, it's over 1 million people that are employed working at ABC agencies.
Yep.
So about 100,000 of them were each given 30 to 40 accounts to play with. And, bot activity, the problem with that is, they're never going to write replies that are sophisticated, that deal with the topic in a professional, real-time way. Bots can only be used to amplify other messages, to vote, or to, spam something, a particular reply. But if you do that too much, it's easy to identify. So what they've done, they've also added a layer, which is the third layer, where spies in the intelligence community, they're called analysts, get real Twitter accounts that were set up and can play with them. And they can switch between, like I said, 30 to 40 accounts. So you have the front end layer, the innocent front end, you have the legal back end, which is the bots. And then you have intelligence community members participating, in these activities, giving it all kind of a human,
Yep.
legitimate touch, right?
Yep.
Now, one thing that you will see when you look at NAFO accounts, they always follow each other,
Mm-hmm.
and there's, for example, how I know that there's over 300,000 NAFO accounts. There's one particular account that the intelligence community uses as a backup database on Twitter. So this account is following everyone who's NAFO. And how did I find out about that? I identified that account as a CIA operative. I followed that account and I observed over time, every single day, how thousands and thousands and thousands new accounts were added as following.
Yeah.
So that account followed everyone who is a NAFO account. Then I identified through the NAFO hashtag that there's only about 3 to 3,500 real NAFO users. Those are the human, legitimate front end that they are using to cover up their much larger back end activity, right?
Yeah.
And the reason they are doing this is because under the US laws, they are not permitted to use this kind of propaganda with Americans, against Americans, right?
Right.
So if ever there's any allegation that this is happening, all they have to do is point at the legitimate front end, the several thousand people that are actually engaging in, defending Ukraine. But they would have hardly any voice if it wasn't for the other hundreds of thousands of accounts that are backing them up, that are liking their tweets, the intelligence community members that are adding their own tweets and switching between accounts and
I
just
don't think they even need
making
to
it
switch.
look.
I think they probably have like access to the API, which lets them look at a full table, right, of accounts that they have access to, and each person has, I don't know, 30 accounts or something, and they can just immediately craft a reply and then just press send using that, right, that interface.
Yeah, so they basically on their interface click on the profile picture
Yep.
and immediately can reply to a tweet that they want to engage with, right?
Correct. Yep.
And the reason I know all of this is because I became a prime target of NAFO, and they have attacked me constantly. So I was in the beautiful position to analyze their behavior, to infiltrate their network with a couple of accounts, to see how it all works, and to find the accounts that are, like I said, basically their NAFO database on Twitter. And the reason they are doing this is because, in order to uh, claim that what they are doing is lawful, they point at the legitimate front end, the 3,500 people, and blame it all on them and say, no, look, there's real people behind it. You can look at it. It's all legitimate, right? We
Yep.
are not doing anything illegal, but they are not really the source of the major amplification that NAFO gets. It's the bots in the background that like their shit, and it's the people in the intelligence community that pile on. And they mostly, by the way, don't identify as NAFO. They're just normal accounts, 20 to 50 to 80 followers. They don't even promote the NAFO hashtag. They just add on to amplify what the real NAFO front end people are doing and making it look so much bigger. So anyone who starts tweeting about the Ukraine war in a way that the CIA operatives don't like, they intimidate them and they make it look to them that the pro NATO front is so strong that it's like 98% of people that are replying are like, you are nuts. You don't know what you're talking about. Ukraine is fantastic. You need to support them, da da da. So anyone who speaks out and reads something that they feel, is wrong and they speak out about it, they are immediately shut down and intimidated and made to feel like they are on the wrong side of history here.
Yep.
That the reality is this is all Russia's fault and Ukraine is the angel, and fantastic that the West is supporting them. And this is the false situation that they create on purpose. And
It's a psyop.
now that the Twitter Files 8 are out, it is quite clear that Twitter is cooperating with the U.S. government, probably not understanding the three-layer bot system that they have: the innocent front end, the illegal digital bots, and then the intelligence community participating with real accounts as well. So this is new. This is something that hasn't happened before, and they are doing this to circumvent US law. And they have done this with surveillance laws where they're not allowed to spy against Americans. And what do? They open the doors for the British, which are part of the Five Eyes spy arrangement with the US. They let the British spy on all Americans by giving them access to basically all internet service providers, to all fiber connections. And then the British are putting their spy product into a spy cloud that is shared with the American spies. So they circumvent these laws. For example, also, the US is not allowed to do bioweapon research in its jurisdiction. That's why they use biolabs in Ukraine, use biolabs in China,
Yep.
and in many other countries to circumvent the restrictions that they have. And the same again is happening here with this bot activity and propaganda, which is also not allowed in the United States. So it's a pattern of behavior by the deep state, by these spy agencies, where they always find a way to circumvent their national laws and still act, against the law through proxies.
Yeah, they're, like with the gain of function research, it's obviously illegal, so they will just have one of their proxy agencies, like the Eco Health Alliance, to carry out their duties in other countries, like Ukraine, and then in China, right? They engaged with Metabiota, which was a company that was facilitated by Hunter Biden, right? And imagine that.
Yeah, by the way, whoever fixed this problem for us at Twitter, I really appreciate it. We're now good to go. We can obviously talk about this openly without any more manipulation of our space. So let's continue. If you have any questions about what I've just explained, go ahead and ask me.
I
Will
got no
you see if
questions.
it'll let me be in a co-host spot, Kim? I'm just curious.
I don't want to risk it.
Okay, that's fine. I don't know if it'll break it, but yeah, I wonder if someone did fix it after the call out to the people in the space and then also Elon Musk. Ian, did you happen to privately get a hold of him at all?
I didn't message them, no. I just
Okay, I
ping
was
them a
just
lot
curious.
on Twitter.
Prodigal,
Yeah.
back. Did you hear what I just said?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Five Eyes have had an agreement for years while they will spy on other nations, people, and just give the information freely. I mean, if you look at the Russiagate hoax, after Trump won, the UK basically apologized and said we had no idea what our former spy, Christopher Steele, was doing. The Ukraine government, which was intricately involved with Alexander Chalupa and the Ukraine embassy, also basically did an apology to Trump. And there was also apologies somewhat issued by Italy and by Australia. So, when people look at just the US intelligence agencies pushing this, no, they had partners in the UK, in Italy, in Australia that helped push this and divide the country. So, this is intelligence agencies in the West who have just run amok.
Yeah, so I mentioned this account earlier, which is basically an online database on Twitter for all these NAFO accounts, including the ones that are bots and the ones that are being used by the intelligence community. I'm going to tell you what this account is. Have a look at it. It's at Matt_Van Dyke, MATT_VANDYKE. This person is involved in co-directing the NAFO bots and the NAFO members. And then there's another CIA operative who is the head of this whole NAFO operation. And his Twitter account is at Masaru3. I spell that for you. At APMASSARO3.
That's Paul Massaro. Yeah, he's a piece of shit.
Let me repeat that because you interrupted. At APMASSARO3. So these two guys are on the ground in Ukraine coordinating the NAFO bot activities. And then the background person that got them all the funding, got them all going, is Adam Kinzinger, who is a lawmaker, in the U.S. House, and has basically introduced legislation a couple years ago that allows for this kind of disinformation, misinformation stuff. And so he is basically the top guy who got them all the money, who's closely linked to the CIA. And Ab Massaro and Matt Van Dyke are the two guys who are running this thing. And this is a CIA operation.
So, Kim, a while back, when the Ukraine stuff was just sort of happening and getting pretty wild on Twitter with just, I don't know, certain narratives and things, and certain narratives being shut down and people being suspended for bringing them up, including, some of there were a lot of theories about what was going on that sort of have seemed to become like true. Anyway, but what I was going to get at is that when I was talking about Ukraine and what was going on, all of these accounts started attacking me, and they were all soccer moms. They were different soccer mom accounts. They were completely fake, and they didn't seem like they were from the United States. Their English was not. It wasn't totally like the way we would speak here in the United States. It seemed like foreigners running these accounts with fake profile pictures and posing as soccer moms, but it was like a group of people. It wasn't just one account. It was several accounts tagging the other accounts to come onto my tweets to basically get me to stop talking about what I was talking about.
Yeah, Twitter, by the way, is such a making such a big mistake working with the government on this type of stuff, because what's happening is they are really hurting their own company now that this stuff is public. And thanks to Elon for putting that out, it's pretty clear that if that also happens at other big tech companies, the US government is actually damaging big tech business. Because why would other countries still allow these people access to their citizens if this is being abused in this way? So what this disclosure is going to do, and I think that's one of the reasons why these spaces were attacked when we started hosting them for the last 2 hours, is because this is such a sensitive topic. And I'll just let me explain something else to you that I think is really important about these NAFO bots. When you look at their activities, like these two CIA operatives that I mentioned, whenever these people make tweets, they get 20, 25,000, 30,000 likes. There's just nothing that they do that would justify the amount of likes. But then when they are hosting spaces, there's only like 200, 300 people in there, right? So, they did a live feed with a U.S. government think tank about telling everyone how great they are and how they are raising money for Ukraine. And there were literally 115 people in there, and they announced that we're going to have this this event. We're going to talk about NAFO. If they really had that many people, that are liking in the tens of thousands the tweets of other NAFO accounts, well, how can it be that this big event where they're getting tapped on the shoulder and given a reward for being such an awesome organization had no fucking people in it? So that's how that this is all bot activity and that this whole NAFO network is a major scam, and that the US is actually the U.S. government and the CIA is actually undermining U.S. laws by doing this stuff.
So I'm seeing a Twitter Files number 9, part 9. I don't know if it's legit. I just sent it to you, Kim, in your DMs, if you could check.
Who's it from?
DC Drano, which I didn't know he got his account back either. I know he was one of the suspended
but I
accounts.
don't know if that's a legit drop. I mean, he might just be memeing or something. I'll just check.
Yeah, it's like a
I would
thread,
agree.
and
I don't think he would.
I mean, unless it's being retweeted by Matt Taibbi or Elon Musk or LH Fang or Barry Weiss, I would not take it seriously.
okay.
Kim, I have a question about Elon's decision to step down. Do you think this is somehow influenced by any recent events? Because I know Elon that is normally not a person to give up ever, right? And I was very surprised by his decision. I know his kid got threatened, but I'm very concerned about the whole way this came about because it's not in his nature to ever give up. So do you think he just reached his threshold where he says, okay?
No, I mean, if you look at it, and I'll
He
say
hasn't
this
made a
before.
decision yet, has
Well,
he?
he said
No, he
he's
hasn't.
searching now. He said he's actively searching. I mean, the issue is that if you look at
But
his
he
other
said that from
business
the beginning,
holdings,
Prodigal.
if you look at his
He
other
said that
business
from the
holdings,
beginning
no,
of
I know
buying
that,
Twitter.
but his
But other
business
people might
holdings
not
are
know that. So I'm just letting him know that Elon said from the
Yeah.
beginning when he was purchasing Twitter that he would likely not remain in charge of Twitter.
I'm aware, but it's nowhere near being fixed right
his
now. He was still
business holdings are
experimenting,
under
right?
pressure. If you look at Tesla, right, their mega factory in China is now producing at 20%. Chinese EVs have entered the European market and multiple other regions, right? So Tesla's under major pressure. Then you look at SpaceX, which is eventually going to be spun off and maybe go public. But if you look at IPOs and merger and acquisition activity, at least in Western markets, IPOs in the New York Stock Exchange are down 90%. Nobody's going to go public with volatility as it is. That's why you've seen the drop. In addition, mergers and acquisitions are gone. He's selling private shares of Twitter. There's also whispers of him selling private shares for SpaceX. So his industries are under pressure. I think he was always going to spin off. I don't think it's necessarily a bad move.
I'm aware, but this is the biggest investment he ever made.
Yeah, but he's a lightning rod
$44
right
billion.
now.
He's not gonna.
If he gets the same, if he gets the same
You would normally
policies,
be. This is the last person
if he
to
has a
give
new
up on
figurehead.
such.
Guys, let's not talk over each other. That's not going to work. I think, Prodigal, you talk first and then give Oliver the floor. No more talking over each other in my space. Thank you.
Yeah, he's a lightning rod right now, and it's affecting his other holdings. If he can have somebody in there he trusts who's not that polarizing, it's a smart business move, especially if it helps his other businesses that are under pressure. I mean, it's simple. It's not that he's scared or he's worried. The Twitter drops are still coming. So if he's able to step back and focus on his other businesses, which he has many, and put somebody in he trusts to do the right thing, then you shouldn't be worried about this. Whoever he puts in is going to be his guy.
The problem is,
he'll still be the chairman, right?
Yeah. So the problem here is running something like Twitter needs a very special type of person who has deep knowledge about what it means to monetize mass user websites. That's not something, it's a new domain for Elon. He is a very capable guy, but I think he needs some time to figure all of this out and what the right options are. And I think he's going to get there. I'm also confident that he thought this Twitter poll would go his way. And I think what happened here is that the bots took over And you could see from the likes to vote ratio from other polls that he had done that there was a huge discrepancy. That's why I made this tweet to him and said that it was unwise, because he is now enemy number one of the deep state with all of these releases that he makes. And obviously, these botnets were used to vote against him. So it's just not a believable poll when you look at like I said, the likes and the vote ratio compared to other polls that he's done before.
Yeah, that's why I'm wondering if NAFO also had anything to do with influencing that poll.
100%. They hate Elon. When Elon tweeted about a peace effort in Ukraine, and he said, he provided clear options what could be on the table to resolve the issue, he was attacked viciously, not just by NAFO bots and NAFO, front end people, but also by the Ukrainian government. They put him on a kill list for 15 minutes until they realized it's not a good idea. It's not a good look. This is going to backfire. And then you had ministers of the Ukrainian government attacking him. And I think the ambassador to Germany, the Ukrainian ambassador, even said, some swear words to him on Twitter. So they were really treating him like a piece of shit, despite him being the single sole provider of internet connectivity to the Ukrainian military through Starlink. I mean, that was really weird to see how the Ukrainian government shot themselves in the foot. And it has really exposed the NAFO activities to Elon himself, who I think before that happened wasn't really so aware about this bot problem, with NAFO and promoting the Ukraine war.
They can also buy votes on those polls for around, I think it's 10 cents a vote or something like that.
No, it's
Yeah,
way more
I'm
than that.
hoping you're gonna.
You can, for $2, you can
Oh,
get 150 votes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm hoping you will rerun this poll with just Twitter Blue paid accounts, but yeah.
Yeah, that's what he said. He likes the idea, the suggestion that someone made that it should be a poll with premium accounts. I think that makes sense, because that's the only way right now you can eliminate all the bots.
Voter ID, because right now, if I wanted, or if any of us in here wanted to, we could make 10 extra Twitter accounts and vote in polls. You don't have to verify your phone number or anything to vote, so it's easy. And it invalidates any real votes. That's the issue. And yeah, some people are going to whine about it and be like, well, I don't want to pay the $8. It's like, well, tough. I mean, we have to have election security. You can't have a person make 10 fucking accounts and vote and invalidate your vote. That's not fair.
Yeah, so I think what the outcome is going to be is that he's going to rerun the poll, and he will do it with blue checks that are premium accounts, and then we're going to see the real result. The amount of likes, by the way, that I got on the tweet suggesting that this was unwise because of the bot activity got 80,000 likes. You can clearly see that people were frustrated with how the poll was going, and so many people pointed out, like I said, the discrepancy with the likes and the votes and some other things. Usually there are way more comments under such polls, and this was just all skewed and all obviously bot activities. So I don't think he's going to honor that now that there's a clear understanding that that's a real possibility.
And there was a real
I really
poll done
hope.
by Harvard, right? Harvard actually carried out a poll asking the exact same question, and they divided them by demographics. And a vast majority of people who took that poll say they want Elon Musk to remain CEO. This is a real poll. This is not some bullshit. They're actually interviewing real people, and and the vast majority, like 67% or something, said they want Elon Musk to remain in charge of Twitter because it's important. And
So here's the thing, right?
yeah,
Elon is a very, very bright guy. And I think he may have even done this as a honeypot to get all the bots. Because when I wrote that this data set for this poll could be used if data mined to identify all the bots and kill them all at once, he replied, interesting. So maybe there's more to the story than we know.
Also, I wanted to say both the poll results for both Kim and myself came back that people think we should stay as head of Twitter. So neither of us are stepping down either. Just shows you how seriously people take these Twitter polls. But I did want to say that, it's, what happened was these the Tesla shareholders that have been backing him. I know this came into play. I don't know to what degree, as Kim is saying. Certainly, some strategic element may have been part of it to catch these bots. But I do know there has been some pressure on him of late from the likes of Rob Herring and others who have sort of said, and Tara, I sent that to you. Oh, Tara's gone. I sent it to you as well, Kim. The tweet of okay, Elon, you've cleaned up Twitter. Now let's get back to Tesla. Which is the reason you're where you are, kind of thing. He's not really used to pressure like that, but it's not really the woke crowd that's making him nervous or anything like that. But he has gotten a lot of pressure from the sort of the a corner that's not he's not used to. Let's just say.
Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Kim. I'm glad you were able to get another spaces going. I really have a question. I guess I want to re-echo the point I was trying to make yesterday that he's in a political position now. So none of the kind of the business acumen that I shouldn't say none of, but his business experience isn't going to prepare him as it might otherwise would for the Twitter corporation. And so my question is for those who know more about the Tesla shareholder world, and maybe there are folks out there listening, is the fact that that Tesla was seen as a darling of the left in terms of uh, investors. That's my perception. Is that kind of resulting in a particular type of investor climate in that company that wouldn't necessarily be around other companies? There's a particular ideological bent to major investors in Tesla that isn't readily apparent or isn't necessarily true at other companies. And I don't know, is that the case? And is that kind of is that causing difficulties for him in ways that someone who ran a more traditional company that didn't have the purposeful relationship with its investors and customers that Tesla did?
Well, I can tell you one thing, being a businessman myself, none of that is going to matter right now. He spent $44 billion on Twitter, and he wrote in another tweet the other day that it was heading for bankruptcy on the fast lane since May. So if he doesn't put the time in to fix that place, and I'm sure he has great people at Tesla and SpaceX that he can delegate to. It's a robust team of good people that he trusts, that he builds. They are taking most of the workload now. And any good businessman knows that one of the key talents you need to have is to delegate people to people, and to find people to be able to fill in and do things for you when required. So his focus has been and is going to be Twitter, at least for some time. I do fear that this is affecting his health, because when I saw the photos of him in Qatar at the Soccer World Cup, I was a bit worried. He looked really tired. It looks like there's a lot of pressure on him, and just not enough time to deal with everything that he needs to deal with in a day. But I'm confident, simply because of, you look at his track record, what he's built, what he's done, that he can turn Twitter around, make it profitable, and the steps that he's taken are already excellent. The business steps that he's taking. So the amount of moderators that they had was absolutely crazy. He cut the workforce right down to get to a level where he can be profitable. I think once they launch these premium features that have been announced, that are not even live yet, more people are going to sign up for premium, so he becomes more independent from advertisers, and can actually do the things that he needs to do to protect free speech on Twitter. So everything is kind of trending well. And I think a couple of mistakes were made. He should not have engaged in direct moderation. He should, that was not a good idea to ban some journalists for doxing, or to make that kind of his personal job. That should be left to people that are focusing on moderation and have pretty clear rules how that's done. I think that was the only big mistake that I personally identified, where he got too much involved personally.
Yeah, I agree. And I also saw he looked very deflated at the Qatar football event. And I was also worried about that. And that's why I was also very surprised that, he has invested 44 billion, that he would step down as a CEO, because, he's the type of guy that would just bite in and get the company back in good shape before he steps down. But in regards to moderation, I fully agree, and I think that was also the problem that put the main target on his back. You should just have very clear moderation rules, and then have other people moderate, right? Not come up with these rules ad hoc and then have these decisions made. It should just be the rules, and those are strictly followed. And if there would be decentralized moderation with a bounty system, for example, that would really be interesting, and he would have all the heat
Yeah,
removed from
a bounty
himself.
system would be perfect, right? You can just utilize your users and give them a bit of crypto, a bit of money in exchange for, moderating, and you can rank them intelligently, so you know who's going to do real work, and you can weed out those that are not really effective. But here's another thing. Elon recently announced through a couple of tweets that they are killing bots, and he asked users, are you seeing it already? Do you see the effects, that things are getting better, less bots advertising crypto or trying to spam people with crypto tweets? And I think when he did the poll about him remaining CEO, he was quite confident that it would go his way, because he thought that with his engineers, they have killed so many bots that he could confidently run that poll. But that is a mistake, because there are still millions of bots, and the vast majority of bots are government owned bots. So I think he's underestimated that. But this is a wake up call for him. And I think it's important. It's great that stuff like this is happening, because every day he's learning so much, and I have confidence in him using this new knowledge that he gains to be even more effective. And now, right now, I mean, imagine how this would have infuriated and upset Elon, the poll result. He'll be looking into bots even harder. So by them doing that, they have really lit a fire under his ass to get all of them.
Was there a bot cleanup just today? This morning when I logged in, at least on the Social Blade analysis, I actually had lost followers, which is the first time it's happened in probably weeks. And I've picked up a little bit, but not that many since then. I'm wondering if there was a bot cleanup instigated even before we, that we don't even know about.
Yeah, I think what happened after the poll, because that's the beautiful thing, right? You have the whole data set. So you know every Twitter account that voted, you have the IP address, you have the location data, and you can use that to find a pattern, to find the bots. And I think that is probably what they are looking at right now.
It's
And that's
also
why I believe. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning that a lot of the bots that are created just for polls, for instance, as websites where you can pay money to vote on things, they're not active accounts, right? They don't tweet anything. So it's very hard to detect them until they start voting. So that is one thing that I don't think he considered. I think he did a pretty good job getting rid of spam bots. The spammers are pretty easy to get because they just post the same thing over and over and over again, right?
Yeah,
But with
that's
these,
right. But the
yeah,
more sophisticated bots, I'm telling you, they are coded in a way that they do engage. They retweet things. They tweet, things themselves. When you look at these accounts, the more sophisticated bots, they look pretty real, right? But there are still patterns because there are so many, and you can't make them unique enough. There are still patterns that you can identify, and I tell you, the data set of that poll is going to be a gold mine for any data miner to find bots.
Can I ask you guys a question? Did you think anything of Elon Musk's meeting with Ken Griffin of Citadel and Jared Kushner in Qatar? Is this just people hanging out, or was there something more to be read into this?
I have no idea. Anyone else?
No, I think personally, I think they're just hanging out. I mean, it's the VIP booth, so you're going to have a lot of hits of state there. You know, you even had a Russian video presenter, right? A television presenter there. So I don't think there's any real meaning to the meeting there. I think people are reading too much into it.
Yeah, I would be surprised if it was anything more than that. You know, this new Twitter blue policy, wherein um, only blue subscribers will be able to vote on Twitter policy. I strongly support it. I mean, when it comes to matters of most significance to Twitter, why not leave it to its most ardent supporters rather than um, what I believe is leaving a vulnerability to vindictive activists and bots. I I conducted, for what it's worth anyway, I conducted my own poll in response in the comment section to Elon's poll. I just said, "Do you trust this poll?" I put it up about an hour after Elon's, and it's sitting at about for what it's worth, about 85,000, and the split is 70%. No, didn't trust the poll. So um, I think at the very least, we can safely assume that bots had played a role um, in the previous in Elon's original poll. So I do think this is the, and plus for clarity, guys, like I mean, if you're not a Twitter Blue subscriber, you can still use and express yourself on Twitter for free. So in order to have a paid membership, it has to have extra perks, and I mean that's why people pay for.
Well, he should be preparing for the deluge. I kind of half jokingly tweeted that he's going to get sued for suppressing the vote on his Twitter polls. And
Did Tom cut out? Or is that just me?
Tom cut out for me too.
He cut out for me as well.
For me too, yeah.
I mean, I think Kim is right about one thing. I mean, he has 40 plus million in this company. He needs it to succeed. I mean, that's a substantial portion of anybody's assets. And he took financing at a time when rates were high. Uh, he has no choice but this to succeed.
Now I also can't hear Prodigal anymore.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I just wanted to, one thing I would say to provide another perspective to that is.
Oh, the problems are back. Ian, are you still there?
It could have been DDoSed.
Yeah. Now it's getting too hot. It's getting too hot. we're having the problems again. Ian, are you still there? No, Ian dropped as well just now. Wow.
Maybe it's just America.
Nah, it's we've been targeted with the last 3 spaces that we had, and crazy stuff was happening where the hosts are getting muted, even though no co-host or anyone could mute anybody. Right? There's no feature to do that, and spaces crashing, and and then you look at other spaces and they're running fine. So if you go to spaces
Straight up booted me
dashboard.
out. Weird.
Yeah, so if you go to spacesdashboard.com, you can see all these other spaces that are running fine for multiple hours that have no problems, and people joined them after our spaces crashed, and verified that they're all running smooth. So this is not a glitch in Spaces today. This is specifically about this topic that we're talking about, Twitter Files 8. Because in my mind, when I look at this is probably one of the most damaging releases for the US government. And the reason is because when you are a nation outside of the US, you're a nation that looks at this, you are going to ask yourself as a leader of a
Oh, he. Wow, it's muting him again. Wow.
how much did you
I'm having problems with this thing also. I'm only hearing about, one quarter of people speaking. So I don't know what's going on here.
So what's quite interesting is it stopped, the space was clean, we had no problems. Then we're talking about some very sensitive, interesting stuff, and now it starts again. Ian, you still there?
Kim, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Do you mind if I chime in for a sec?
Yeah, go ahead.
Speaking to Tom's concern about
And gone. Wow. We are back to full-on sabotage of the space.
Yeah, Kim, it's not going to work. I just came in to say hello. Enjoy
Yeah,
your
it's pretty
day, 'cause,
unbelievable what's happening right
getting
now. I mean, this
kicked.
is clearly deliberate. The instant someone tries to address what Tom said, boom, they get kicked out. Nice. Very nice.
Yeah, what this shows you, though, is that this is such a sensitive topic, right? This is really hitting the nerve. This is super problematic for the government. And of course, again, on top of all of this FBI drama that we looked at yesterday, you now have the, Pentagon and the intelligence community using Twitter again in another way to promote their wars, to promote their foreign policy on Twitter, with at the time the endorsement and knowledge of Twitter going along with it. That is a huge problem. Yeah, I'm getting muted again, remotely muted as a host of this space. I'm getting remotely muted continuously. So, and people who are in the space added as speakers get removed the moment they start talking. So this is a deliberate attack on this Twitter space.
Fun. Yeah. The moment I start speaking, it boots me out. Fuck you. Whoever's doing this. Fuck.
And gone again. Wow.
I saw your mute icon flashing on and off the whole time for 20 seconds.
Yeah, it's not me doing that. So that the same thing happened earlier with Tara in her space, and it's happening to me as well. So there's definitely someone there playing around with the space deliberately. Are you still there, Olivier?
Yes, I can still hear you.
Yeah. So you joined a bit later. We had a space already that was killed 3 times in a row, where Mario was hosting Twitter Files 8. And then we switched to Tara, which was trying twice to host the space, and she also had to give up because she got muted all the time as a host, which no user in a space can do. You can never mute the host. So this is a remote attack. And then I opened mine up to see if, maybe Tara and Mario had issues. And the same thing happened in my space. And what we did then, because we wanted to see if this is yeah, so it's happening again. Did you see that? Olivier, you still there? Wow. That's insane.
Dropped out, and you keep getting muted. So yeah.
Yeah, I keep getting muted, and I was just explaining that after these things happen in all three spaces, um, we went to other spaces, and none of them had these issues. So only a space with the Twitter Files 8 topic was attacked every time it was reopened. So this is definitely deliberate. It's targeted just against us speaking about this topic. They just don't want us to talk about this stuff. It's pretty obvious.
Well, by far, it's the largest space on Twitter right now.
Yeah, because the people who are here, they are witnessing firsthand what's happening, right? I mean, they can see that this is deliberate, that this is not happening in other spaces. If you go to spacesdashboard.com, you will see other spaces that have been running for 4 hours, 5 hours, 3 hours, and they are doing fine. They are not having any of these issues. It's only us because we are talking about this topic.
Kim, I've been meaning to ask you, what do you think about this? Because I just think it's political. This Henry Cavill thing with the Superman movie, and they're kicking him out for that based on
And Tom has been removed. Wow. That is insane. Well, we will keep this going. I mean, they can play this game for as long as they want.
Superman,
But we'll
Henry
keep
Cavill movie. What are your thoughts on him taking over the Warhammer franchise?
Ian, can you hear me? Wow. Let me move Spings back up. That's crazy. The moment people talk in the space, they're just getting moved down back to listeners.
Change the
And
title to "Come Shill Your NFT."
yeah, this is crazy. And like I said, guys, this happened in 2 other spaces. So this isn't just this space. Any space that we opened dealing with this topic had the same issue. Speakers constantly move down, and hosts muted remotely. No third party can mute a host. It has to be someone who has admin rights at Twitter or remotely has admin access to Twitter. It's just too hot. They don't want us to talk about it. It's too hot. I'm just moving people that are getting removed automatically back up. And we will keep doing this, because this space is being recorded. Everything that's happening here is recorded. And if you want to verify that this isn't happening anywhere else, go to spacesdashboard.com and join any other spaces. Just find some other spaces, join them. There are several live right now that have many hours on them with 1,000 or more listeners. Go in there and then come back here and you'll see it's only happening to us. Ian, are you back? Tara, are you back? Prodigal, are you back?
I'm here. Yes.
Anyone? It's insane, right? Like when you get kicked down back to listeners, can you still hear what I'm saying? Wow. Look at that. Everyone, you're witnessing a deliberate attack against this space. This is not happening in any other space. And it has happened to Mario's space, Tara's space, and now my space. This is deliberate, and they are censoring us because they don't want us to talk. I've just been muted again remotely. This is insane. Prodigal, are you there?
Yeah, it keeps booting me out. Whenever you speak, you get muted. I see that your mute button keeps flashing, like crazy flashing.
Yeah, like super fast.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you.
Okay, so whenever we get booted out, we can still hear you, just so you know. So you're still coming through that way.
Okay,
Yep.
that's good.
Yeah.
Again, if there's someone in this space who works at Twitter or for Twitter Spaces, please have a look at this. We mentioned it before. Something got fixed because we could talk without problems for, I would say, was it like 45 minutes? And now we have the same problems again of a deliberate targeting against a space that wants to talk about this Twitter Files 8 topic. So anyone from Twitter who's in here right now, please have a look at it and try and fix it again.
So, what about the idea, before I'm booted, of blue checks getting different votes or weighted votes based on follower counts?
Yeah, the problem with that, Tom, is if you have a botnet, you can have your bots follow each other, and you can basically just create enough followers. But I think
Can you hear me? Anyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so it appears Kim's getting muted. You know, it is interesting that this is happening.
wow, this is crazy.
Yeah, we can hear you again, Kim.
That is insane.
Yeah, this is the most, based on that website, the number one spaces on Twitter right now, and it ain't working, to put it charitably. Oh, it looks like I'm the only one here. So we've been trying to cover Twitter drop number 8 related to Pentagon bots knowingly left on. Ian, you're back.
Yep, I'm back temporarily until I'm booted again.
Well,
You think these are still moles at Twitter doing this, or you think it's outside hacking?
Well, it could be,
who-
or it could be a person that is working at Twitter that has been infiltrated into a position, with admin rights at Twitter by one of these FBI people. So once they were in the company, like this guy Baker, he could have hired a couple of people that are just, deep state assets that are either doing this at Twitter or remotely, having admin rights and being able to mess with the spaces. Tom, are you still there?
Yeah, I can hear you, and I haven't been booted since I've been back on for a minute, a few minutes.
Good.
I was telling the listeners we've been trying to talk about the disclosure today that there were countless Pentagon bots on Twitter. Twitter executives knew about it, and while pretending to be concerned about national governments using bots to change perceptions, they allowed the Pentagon to do it. We had a debate about what.
Yeah, and now Tom is gone. Wow. By the way, anyone who wants to verify later that this has been happening in multiple spaces, look at the recording that Mario Naval has of his space dealing with this topic, and then look at the
This is crazy. Y'all hear what's happening in here? Stay tuned.
Wow, that was the longest time this muting took place. I couldn't say a thing, and when I press on the mute button, like when I'm mute.
I think I'm back. And Kim is muted.
It's so pervasive now. I can't even
Temporarily back
speak
now.
for. It's so crazy. Like it's now I can't even. Once it starts.
It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you keep being muted, and I see that you are muted again, and I'm speaking, so it's probably going to be my turn to get booted out. That's per usual.
Tom, can you hear me?
I can. I'm back.
Tom, Tom, can you please try and host a space with the same name, Twitter Files 8, and we'll just move over there and see if the same happens to you? So I've just been mass muted again. Tom, if you can still hear me, could you please try and open a space? Just call it Twitter Files 8. And then once you have started that, I'm going to close this one down and I will ask everyone here to join Tom Fitton's space. So maybe follow Tom Fitton and we'll see if all right, everyone. It looks like Tom has started a space. So I'm going. All right, I'm getting muted all the time. So follow Tom Fitton.
So I sent Kim an invite. Could someone also let some of the other folks on that space know that I started it up again?
Yeah, I'll DM a few of the previous speakers.
And Ian too.
Yep, with the link.
So I'll just I see Ian here. I'll let Ian co-host. So for those of you just joining, this core group has been trying
thanks
to
for the invite. Hopefully this one
Sure.
works. Looks like
Yeah.
we're over the target.
So I'll bring in some more folks. I don't know if Kim is still running this space. He asked me to start this up. That's why I did.
Yep. He should be popping in soon. I'll send him an invite. Okay, I sent him an invite. At least I'm not being booted here. That
Yeah,
actually works.
Ian, and I'll defer to you on the speakers. You have more familiarity. Who was our
Yeah,
group
so
of speakers?
Kim told everyone to come here. He ended the space just now.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. You can make him the co-host when he pops in.
Yeah, I will. For those of you joining, this core group, Mario had started it earlier, and I think
There's Kim.
Yep, I added him in.
Can you make him co-host, or I have
No,
to do that?
you have to do that. Yeah, like you did for me.
All right.
All right, guys. Let's see how long this lasts.
All right, Kim, I'm gonna invite you to co-host.
Yeah. This will be fun.
All right, we're back.
Yeah, we're over the target, as they say. Getting a lot of DMs.
Well,
man, everybody's like, they're super stoked. Even people who are not like super active on Twitter, they are, sending me messages on Discord and other places like Telegram. I have a bunch of different socials, and they're like, "Yo, keep the spaces up. Keep it going, keep it going." I'm like, "All right, keeping it going."
Yeah, we're keeping it going. We're not going to surrender.
Yeah, hell
No
no.
fucking way.
Hell no. This is wild.
I mean, there's been a series of escalating Twitter files releases, showing essentially intelligence community management of big tech platforms yesterday. That's a pretty short summary, and which involved cash payments.
Mm-hmm.
And then today we had disclosures that Twitter was being widely used by the Pentagon as part of a propaganda effort through bots directed at, and I guess we can debate as to whether they were directed, but on their face directed at foreign areas of conflict in the Middle East. And Twitter knew that was happening and didn't do anything about it.
Yep.
At the same time, the same intelligence establishment that was using Twitter to engage in conversations abroad, right, and influence foreign governments abroad and entities abroad, were pretending it was the gravest sin in the world when it was done here. We're targeting Americans, and it looks like they were playing part of that same game, and using that as a basis to censor Americans based on that theory. The Russians were out to engage Americans and they needed to be suppressed. And if that meant suppressing Americans, so be it. Protect democracy.
Pretty much. And beyond, they have this thing, where they have a mission creep, right? First, it was stopping foreign election influence, which, as we all know, is based on a lie. It's based on the big lie in 2016. And they used that to expand the scope to cover pretty much everything. Right now, it's about promoting this war in Ukraine, spending American tax dollars. I mean, you just had Mitch McConnell come out and say, "Oh, we're going to be the party of giving Ukraine money." Like, what the hell? Like, it's a uniparty effort here, right? It's and man, Mitch needs to go.
Tom, you just said something that I haven't heard before, and it reminded me of this. It's like, listen, guys, we're gonna come in. We're the U.S. government. We're gonna come in. We're gonna take your rights away. But listen, it's because we don't want the Russians to come and suppress your rights. Just understand that what we're doing is so that they can't come do it to you, okay? But we're the government. We can do it. It's so ridiculous.
It's absolutely absurd.
And it continues. I think one of the big issues that I think is going to be next up or I would hope is next up, there are the COVID documents, the COVID files out of the Twitter files, because that's where there's truly a massive interaction. I know, I'm kind of going on memory here, but I'm sure folks can pull it up if they Google it. That we had uncovered documents where the money actually was flowing into the government. They were providing free public service announcements. I guess that's the most charitable way of putting it. Facebook and some of these other social media companies to HHS to push whatever propaganda efforts they needed to be pushed on COVID. And so I think the interactions you're going to find. I mean, if you think that they were acting as an outlet of the FBI, I mean, I bet you had HHS people working in these offices in the big tech platforms. I don't know how much closer it could have gotten given the ban hammer that was coming down on so many accounts for daring to speak anything outside of approved opinion on the COVID fights.
Yeah. Hey, Tom, I've been following you for years. You're clearly a bright lawyer. I've seen,
I'm not a lawyer. Warning.
Okay. Well, your organization probably employs a couple of lawyers, right?
We do.
Yeah. So, I've been following a lot of the cases that you brought, a lot of the results that you get, FOIA requests that turned out, very important information. Um, when you look at all of these Twitter file releases, isn't this a gold mine for you and your organization? I mean, you have so much to work with now to go and take this evidence and ask, the government or subpoena or take legal action with FOIA requests to get information from the other side. Right? What we are seeing now is what Twitter's releasing, right? So can't you just go and bring a case against the FBI and say, hey, you have to disclose to us all of your discussions that you had with Google, with Facebook, with all of these other big tech companies. Like, how can you use what we have now to inflict more pain on the government for having done this?
Well, I mean, you highlight exactly what can be done with the records under the Freedom of Information Act, which is the federal law here. You file a request with the agency and you ask for the records, and they have generally, 20 days to 30 days, depending administratively how it goes, to respond. And they either have to give you the documents, or give you an update as to what they're doing. And if they don't respond adequately, you can go to court. And so as these files are being released, you can be sure that Judicial Watch, and I'm sure we're not the only ones looking at it, because there's some others who are doing this work as well, are kind of walking, what do they call it, walking back the cat, right, to the agencies to get the mirror of these types of discussions and documents at the FBI and DHS. And I know just recently we sued, I think it was the Department of Homeland Security, for their, remember a few months ago, about 2 months ago now, we had that consortium talk about how they had a ticket process, right, for government entities to go to the social media platforms to get folks taken down. So we asked for the records, we were given the hand to the face, and we sued. So you can expect more of this. But what's also interesting about this, Kim, is that and everyone else, is that when FBI colludes against you, or anyone listening, and your account is harmed or something like that, there are potential litigation opportunities for folks and civil rights cases and things of that nature. I mean, we in
Yeah,
California,
go ahead.
there there was a case, we had found that the California Secretary of State's office was doing everything we were worried about, working with the Biden campaign PR firm to try to find, quote, disinformation, and then go to these companies and get stuff taken down. And they did that with DC Drano on Twitter, and I know he's sued separately with Harmeet Dillon. They did that with Judicial Watch. We found those documents. So we found all of that, what they did to DC Drano and to Judicial Watch. They caused the Judicial Watch video to be taken down about election issues. So we just sued the California Secretary of State's office over that civil rights violation that I was describing. So there's going to be a lot of litigation. Of course, we have that Missouri case that's proceeding in I call it the Missouri case, but there's a group of states suing to get access to information, and Fauci's had to suing over this suppression and censorship operation related to COVID. Fauci's had to testify, and others have testified as well. So there's a lot that can be done outside of Congress, because Congress is just going to be frustrated to, no matter what it does, even if it's good, it's going to be frustrating.
So let me ask you something else, because Twitter, when Elon bought it, surely has not disclosed any of this prior to the purchase, because he could have used that in his court case where he wanted to back out of the deal. Now that he has all this information, he said he didn't just buy a company, he bought a crime scene. If you put your legal hat on, what do you think are the options that Elon has now? Because I mean, there's multiple, I would say, criminal conspiracies going on. There's definitely a lot of stuff going on that has decreased the value of Twitter significantly, especially for Twitter to allow government bots to operate on Twitter and create a negative user experience. All of this shadow banning, I'm sure they would not have disclosed to Elon before he bought the company. That has cost millions and millions of accounts leaving Twitter to go to other platforms like Parler, Truth Social, you name it. So the damage is huge, and he basically bought this wasp nest of problems. What do you think he can do to pursue the previous shareholders or the company or the board to get his money back?
You know, I think that's probably something he's asking his lawyers now. One of the things that's so extraordinary about what he's doing, uh, as someone who's been involved in doing watchdog work for 30, almost 25, I guess it's 25 years now. You see a company kind of admitting to wrongdoing in these documents. And there are certain liabilities that potentially come from that, either from the prior, for, as you're suggesting, the prior management, or I don't know if it is, does he kind of take on those liabilities as the new owner? I don't know enough about corporate law to know how that might work. I mean, when you have, for instance, I know specifically there was a Federal Election Commission complaint. For those of you listening from outside of the United States, it's the federal entity that monitors campaign finance law compliance issues. And there was a complaint filed against Twitter, alleging illegal coordination, illicit coordination, or in-kind contributions to the Democrats in the Biden campaign. I may have the specifics wrong, but generally there was a fight about Twitter was up to no good working for the Democrats, and they denied any collusion. Well, now those documents that have come out in Twitter files number, I think it was 4. It was actually it was near the first batch, right? 1 or 2, show immediately that there was collusion with the Democrats and the Biden campaign to take down content.
Yeah,
And there was no similar collusion with the Trump people. Nothing like that.
yeah. And what happened at the Senate hearing? Jack lied under oath, telling, answering questions about shadow banning and saying that never happened. And the crazy thing is, his general counsel was sitting right behind him. You can see it in the video. And she had knowledge of it, which we now know from the Twitter files that have been released. And she didn't step in. So even if Jack is claiming that he had no idea, the moment he said something that is clearly wrong and she had knowledge of that, as general counsel she would have had to step in and correct that, and she didn't do that. So I think they both knew exactly what is happening at Twitter, and they lied. They decided to lie to the US Senate.
Yeah, Ian, I mean, you've heard a lot of Musk's other spaces that I may not have heard on. Has he kind of addressed this issue about the prior misconduct of management directly?
I think he's only mentioned it on Twitter itself. I don't believe that he actually addressed it in any of the spaces. I mean, the questions that we posed to him were not necessarily related to these things. Although he said that. Okay, so when we asked him what his opinion was, he said that he only knows about as much as we do. Right? He is not getting. His time at Twitter is to focus on the engineering, and he hasn't read through the files personally. So he's waiting for these journalists to comb through all these files, and there's a lot of them. It's raw data, so it's very difficult to, just look at it and say, "Oh, here's what's happening." They have to actually cross-reference a lot of stuff. That's the reason why you notice this a few times. I think Li Fang even mentioned it today that he had to interview a bunch of people who either currently work at Twitter or worked at Twitter to ask them to confirm certain information or ask them to provide all of these details. So the journalists are actually doing journalistic work. They're not just sifting through files, they're actually interviewing people.
So, just to give you an update based on this spacesdashboard.com, we're the number one spaces again on Twitter. It's about 5,500 listeners. Now, Kim, I think when you had the shutdown, it was well over 6,000. So, do you think there was a technical issue with a capacity issue, simply given that we're 5 times the size of the next biggest spaces, or do you really think it was an intervention here?
Well, we know it was an intervention because we had 2 other hosts prior to myself. So we had Mario Naval host the space, and he had the same issues. Then it was Tara hosting the space. That's when the host mute started. So she got always muted, and people who were speaking were kicked off. And then I said, okay, let me run it. and then the same thing happened there. But then there was like a window of 30 to 45 minutes where it was running smooth, and then it went back to being bad. So let's see how long this one is going to work. And then what we also did, we sent people from our spaces to other spaces. And what happened there is they confirmed there are no issues in any other spaces. And when you go to the website spacesdashboard.com, you can see many other spaces that are live now that are 3 hours, 2 hours, 5 hours, 4 hours running. And obviously they have no issues, otherwise they wouldn't still be running. And they have, some of them have thousands of people in them. So it's pretty obvious that the Twitter files topic has been targeted. This space specifically about this topic has been targeted.
So I was thinking about the Elon Musk scenario, and the whole polling issue, and we've had you had a prior discussion before you kind of got shut down about him restricting the polling to blue check marks. I see Elon Musk was in a bad way after the attack on his family, the failure, the kind of the joint operation by the media. Looked like to me to dox him and then to attack him when he went to try to enforce some civility on the platform that would have protected him and others from that abusive tactic. And he was looking for reassurance and he didn't get it. And I saw his silence in response to the poll as something, not positive. But Kim, I think you probably saved him and threw him a lifeline by, explaining that the poll was probably not as scientific, even in a Twitter world, as it could have otherwise have been. And he's kind of been reinvigorated and seems a little bit more active and willing to participate and continue fighting. Is that a fair reading of where we are or where we've been and where we're going?
I mean, to me, it was pretty obvious that the poll result was skewed. It made no sense. And also, when you look at the likes to vote ratio from his previous polls and you compare it with this one, there was clearly bot activity because the likes didn't match, what he had in other polls in the past. So, and it was also pretty clear to me that he went into this poll with some confidence that Twitter had killed quite a few bots. But what they were targeting were spam bots. They are not the ones that are, run by the government, that are, used for propaganda campaigns. So those are much harder to identify and to remove, and they have clearly shown up in force to create this result. This was an attack against Elon because he's now the, let's be frank, number one enemy of the deep state releasing all of this information.
Ian, what do you think?
I'm in complete agreement. I do think that they're going after Elon Musk right now from various different angles. They're not just attacking him in one way. It's like Senator Warren is also launching an attack on him by going after his investors. Like, who's ever heard of this, right? Like, you look at the attacks that he's receiving right now. It's not just some leftists on Twitter who are mad at him. It's the media, it's the politicians, and it's not just the U.S. government. There are a lot of Europeans who don't like what he's doing because his free speech policies actually go against some of the laws that they're trying to pass in the European Union, and so those people are upset with him, trying to threaten him with sanctions. I mean, I'm not sure if you guys saw the other day, but one of the leaders of the the European Union threatened him with sanctions. She was like, soon, sanctions. It's like not even a threat of a sanction, but promising that sanctions would follow if he was, enforcing the rules on Twitter, which is absolutely absurd. Never heard of that before.
Yeah, we focus here in America on, Elizabeth Warren sent a nasty letter to Tesla. The Federal Trade Commission sent 2 harassing letters to Twitter about Elon Musk's management. But you've had EU officials of one type or the other threaten Musk, most recently over his removal of journalists who knowingly or should have knowingly, or they either knew or should have known they were doxing him when they sent people to a specific site which had his private plane location data. And so this is kind of a world. The left is not, it's notoriously transnational, and there's a way of thinking about free speech that is alien, that has been rejected by the transnational left in the United States and in Europe, and it's resulting in this severe and significant pushback against Musk for not bringing in free speech on Twitter, but freer speech. So it isn't like a free for all, that's for sure. And he's highlighted how slurs are much less likely to be seen on Twitter than previously.
And yet, in
For
spite of all the things he's done, right, reducing hate speech, or you can argue that hate speech is not really a legal term, but by removing nasty slurs and harassing messages, you don't see them quite as often, and it's true you don't. Uh, they're still attacking him. They use some false number, and who knows how they got this number. The Center for Countering Digital Hate in the UK claims that hate speech has gone up by 300% against black people. It's like, based on what? What are you tracking? Like, how are you getting these numbers when Twitter itself shows that uh, the, the people typing out these words are not even being elevated? The people are just not typing it out. And Elon, when he was in our space, one of our spaces, he said that uh, there was a small group of people actually responsible for all of the hate speech that they saw in that particular week, right? They've all been banned, but they were all tweeting out nasty, nasty things. It's something like a couple of hundred accounts that are responsible for over 300 tweets that were, just the word, the K word, the N word, and so on. So this idea that he's not doing anything to address hate speech on Twitter is absolutely false.
Yeah, I mean, I would say those people in the US, the UK who participated in that poll, maybe I'd say hashtag voter bias, perhaps. But yeah, this is the thing. I've gotten so many DMs, that, oh, he's a hypocrite, this, that, he doesn't believe in freedom of speech. And I say the same thing, and I just want to say it one time here. To all those people who think that, you don't know the Constitution. You don't know the Constitution. The Constitution says grants you freedom of speech from the government. The government cannot censure you from speech, right? But you can't go in somebody's restaurant and scream whatever you want. You can't go into anyone's business and scream whatever you want. So the fact that this Twitter Files is an issue, the fact that Elon has made it an issue, is because essentially what Kim was talking about yesterday. These people were grooming people at Twitter. People from the US government were essentially grooming people at Twitter. So they were essentially an extension of the US government. So now we have this freedom of speech, we have a constitutional right as an issue. But when we have someone like Elon Musk, who privatized a company, who is now saying, hey, these are the parameters. You don't abide by them, you don't get a pass because you're a journalist. That's the rules. So, it's just, let's not conflate these issues that so many people want to do. Let's not do that and just talk about the facts.
Let me tell you something that I think is the biggest problem that the US government and their Western allies will have with Twitter Files 8. The war in Ukraine is quickly losing support. When you look at people tweeting today compared to a couple months ago, the Ukrainian flags are gone. People are now calling out Zelensky as corrupt. The things that you didn't see before are very strong now. If the US government loses their botnet, imagine what that means for the war. And that is also why the EU is putting so much pressure on Elon now, because they are so fully invested. They have spent tens of billions of dollars, the US now over $100 billion into this proxy war to try and unbalance Russia. And imagine if they don't anymore have this propaganda machine that keeps it all going when there's already so many voices against it now. Imagine that breaking off and you only hear the real voices. This war will be over in a week.
Is anyone talking?
Go ahead. No,
Hi, Tom.
Kim just stopped talking. That's all.
Okay. I didn't want to cut anyone off, but I just wanted to
No,
add
go
to
ahead,
it.
Tara.
You guys, thanks for inviting me and thanks for starting this one up. Oh my gosh, what a day. This has been wild. But I just really quickly wanted to say, you know, another issue is that the media never rectifies anything that they get wrong, including what Ian was just discussing. The fact that they were saying all of this hate speech and racial slurs had
Go
gone,
ahead.
you know,
No.
up exponentially when in reality it was coming from the same group of accounts. You know, they never rectify that. They never. But I just wanted to add claims that they make. And it's so frustrating to watch it and just be completely blatantly lied to, and people buy it. The first initial take, and that's what they run with, and then they never fix it. There's never anything else said about it.
It's not just them either. I mean, the media is propelling it. Sorry, I'll let you speak next. The media is propelling it, and also, you know, politicians like Elizabeth Warren and Ted Lieu are regurgitating that same lie. Yeah, just want to add that. So, Kim, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So Adam Schiff is the one who is running the spear for this whole thing about Twitter now being having more hate speech, more attacks against minorities, against Jews, more anti-Semitism, like all this stuff. But who's creating this, right? These bots can be used for anything. So if the current government wants to make Elon look bad, all they have to do is increase these attack parameters against certain groups, and there you go. There you have your statistics right away, and they can point at a huge number of tweets that is doing the stuff. But this can all be created, and that's the problem here. So the number one priority for Elon right now is to kill all these bots, including all the government bots. And that is what they are most worried about, because once their propaganda machine is gone, and Twitter is the primary channel when it comes to anything to do with Ukraine, that is going to change the landscape for this war completely, because it already in reality has no more support. And if the bots fall away, then it's going to become crystal clear that 98% of the people are saying enough is enough. We don't want this shit anymore. And there's no more bullshit, that is manipulating people. Imagine how quickly this war will be over. And that's what they want to prevent. Because what does that mean? It means all the money that they've sent to Ukraine will then be wasted. They will never be able to recoup that. And Russia wins, China wins, the US loses yet another war and looks like a complete idiot. And the EU, that has gambled so much on this, which sees their industry getting deindustrialized and destroyed because of this crazy sanction regime that they started with the US, they are all going to lose out. So they've all made clear we cannot lose this war. This war will continue until Russia retreats and Ukraine has won. Imagine if they don't have the propaganda machine anymore. It will be very hard for them to achieve that goal.
What's really fascinating, I was thinking about the bots that you were saying, how they could be used to amplify hate speech. When Elon was in our chat, he kind of laughed at it. Like, I mean, not like laughed at it as in it's a joke, but he was alluding to something, right? He said that a small group of accounts was responsible for 300,000 hate speech messages, and he didn't want to go into it. He didn't want to explain who these people were, who these bots were, where they came from. And, like, part of me thinks, what if he was referring to these government bots? Like he could have easily referred to, say, 8chan or something, right? Like, I mean, all of them, they're trolls. They could very easily do the same thing, and yet, he was very coy about the who these bots were, where they came from. It makes me think this is something. This is a lot to do with the government.
Yeah, they can just create the evidence that they need to cause some problems.
I have a little bit of a different view than Kim on the Ukraine issue. I tend to think that we always plan to lose. The United States does when they engage in the sort of situations we're now dealing with in Ukraine. I don't think anyone wanted the Russians to invade. I don't think anyone wants the Russians to win in the United States. But they often act as if they don't want the Russians to lose. And I think one of the remarkable stories of the Ukraine war is the slow rolling of support out of the United States in support of the Ukraine war effort. It's now when was the invasion? Now 10 months, 11 months ago. It's probably
Yes,
longer.
it's February.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
late
and now only are they going to begin to get Patriot batteries. It seemed to me if this was an opportunity to beat the Russians back, there would have been a quick and instant, as relatively speaking, an instantaneous mobilization of U.S. support. Instead, it was grudging, and which I think is an element of corruption, and I think most don't want to admit to, especially in this city, is that, in my view, Joe Biden has been. Putin has taken the measure of Joe Biden long ago. He's aware of his personal corruption as it links to his family. He knows the money's gone from Moscow and Burisma. Everyone should remember Burisma was a Russia-friendly company, right? It was a Russia-linked company. It wasn't the Ukrainian side of the corruption ledger, and so he knew what was going on. So if you're going to engage in risky adventurism, why not do it when there's a compromised, conflicted, and really challenged president in the White House? And I think that was in large measure something that needs to be further discussed that too many in the establishment don't want to discuss. So I'm meandering a little bit there, but the fact is that after Afghanistan and given the corruption of Biden, our strategic competitors in Russia and China have acted in ways that suggest they don't think much of Biden. And I would highlight the corruption that they all know about and factor that in. But I guess that's a broader issue. I do want to bring it back, though, to the Biden file. Excuse me, not the Biden files, but the Twitter files.
Yeah, Biden files is good. Hey, just to respond real quick, most people don't understand what this war in Ukraine is really about. So I will just, in 1 minute, explain it really quick. What happened after the 2007-2008 financial crash, which was, caused by the US with their regulations, it allowed for this massive bubble, which then took economies all around the world down. The big financial crisis of 2007-2008. When that happened, a number of countries came together and said, we cannot trust the US to be the steward of the global financial system anymore. This has cost us so much money. They are gambling over there. They're not really acting prudently with the responsibility over the global financial system. So a couple of countries came together and formed BRICS. And BRICS is this new alliance of Russia, China, South Africa, India, and another country. And now they're talking about BRICS Plus, which is extending it by another 17 countries, including Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and so on. Long story short, in 2009, BRICS announced that they want to move away from the US dollar as a reserve currency, and that they are looking at a pool of currencies that is backed by gold or other real world assets to compete against the dollar in trade. And Saudi Arabia has now joined this, which is the backbone of the petrodollar, and other countries have joined this. So the real reason why the US is seeking conflict with Russia and China is because they need to prevent this from happening. Because if the US dollar is no longer the reserve currency, or even just loses 50% of the reserve currency market share, the US is instantly bankrupt. With the high debt that the US has and the amount of money printing that is taking place to fund its excesses, once the US dollar is no longer the reserve currency, the whole house of cards comes crashing down. This is why we have this war that is aimed at unbalancing Russia, and that's why we have the conflict over Taiwan with China. And that is also why I think the US is going to start sanctioning China even more and saying, hey, as long as you are supporting Russia, we're going to go after you. And the whole thing is on a course of major escalation, because if the US cannot remain the hegemon of the world with the control over the reserve currency, it's literally bankrupt. That is why we are having this global conflict with China, Russia, and the US. That's a lot to think about.
Well, that's one theory.
Well, it's the one that makes most sense. Why do you think Europe, the entire West, is fighting against it? Because they're all relying on the current financial system the way it is. When the US started printing a lot of money, doing quantitative easing, and basically giving large banks interest-free loans to pump up the stock markets, all the other Western nations followed suit, did the same thing: quantitative easing, endless money printing. That entire system is now under threat because of BRICS. So the conflict that we are seeing is not about Ukraine. It has nothing to do with Ukraine. It's just to unbalance Russia and China.
Prodigal, did you have something?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real threat. If you look at China's Belt and Road Initiative, a lot of us look at this and say, well, China's overpaying for access to nations and resources that Western capital is pretty good at capitalizing on and making moves if there's money there. But when you look at the Belt and Road Initiative contracts, they have a mechanism within it that they could switch it to the yuan and basically denominate in their currency. I mean, if you look at U.S. trajectory, once our manufacturing base was hollowed out after NAFTA and opening China to the WTO, what does America have at this moment? It has consumerism and it has the financial system, right? You look at the raw resources that the world runs on, the BRICS have it. And that includes a lot of the precious metals, rare earth metals, and minerals and precious metals that the world's going to rely on for this alleged green revolution. And this is something where you're starting to see this. I mean, if you look at CCP speeches for the last couple of years, they basically said outright, we have stolen as much tech as we need to from the West, and now our focus is going to be on innovation. So if this does occur, whether through BRICS, which is expanding, and you see the Saudi Arabia deal where it's now initially was 30 million, now it's 50 million. Now they're saying use the Shanghai Exchange. There's issues regarding not only the ability to continue dollar denominated trade, and a lot of nations are going to be forced to make a decision as to whether to keep the lights on and feed their people or continue in this system. That's why India, Israel, Turkey, a lot of nations have, even though they're NATO allies, Turkey in particular have straddled the line, and their connections to the Sino-Russian alliance has increased. I mean, this is a real threat. Is it going to be overnight? No. But what people have to understand is a beachhead has been made, right? You don't need to have a competitor to MasterCard and Visa. If you start up as Discover and you start gaining traction, then it's there. And the more that this happens, the harder it's going to be to finance and roll over U.S. debt, especially at a time when rates are higher. So people who dismiss this and think, well, this isn't something that would play a role and U.S. geopolitical influence and policy, I would strongly be concerned about this, because you're looking at it on two fronts now. It's not only BRICS, which, yes, it's preliminary. A lot of nations are, asking to enter it, but it's also the Belt and Road Initiative. And, you look at it, China doesn't need to uh, have higher per capita. They just need parity with the U.S., and based on their size, they outflank us. So this is a really, significant threat that, I'm concerned about. I would assume the national security state is concerned about, and it's something that I think does play a role in a lot of our moves. But I think we're in a catch-22 at this moment, right? You look at the amount of wheat, aluminum, nickel, etc., that comes out of Russia and a lot of these BRIC countries, including natural gas and oil. If they take over the Middle East, which Biden's relationship is not great there, especially with MBS. I mean, this is a big, big problem, and people really don't realize that when empires or basically geopolitical states of this influence lose the reserve currency in this type of environment, there's no coming back. The only other time a nation was able, an empire had this happen, it didn't collapse, was the British Empire. But they handed the baton over to the U.S., their Anglo-Saxon cousin. At the same time, they underwent the Industrial Revolution, which created an entirely new economy. Does
Yeah,
anybody see that occurring now?
and
No.
just look at the financial health of the US. A lot of people don't realize how bad it is. 32 trillion national debt, 92 trillion complete debt, 176 trillion in unfunded liabilities. If you add all of this together, it's more debt than all US assets combined, of all companies, all land, every business, everything that is an asset in the US is overshadowed by this debt and liability. So if the US loses uh, the US dollar reserve currency status, it's literally game over. And just to give you an idea of the size and magnitude of BRICS now, with I think the total number of 17 countries that are have applied now, it's 50% of the world population and 40% of global GDP. That is significant enough to take the US dollar out.
As one of the things I think we should remember is that prior to the Twitter files, there's been plenty of information about some of the issues that we're talking about here. And, I kind of remember something coming up in some of our COVID records over at Judicial Watch about the Silken Road Initiative. And one of the other top billionaires that we're not allowed to talk about or raise questions about is Bill Gates. Musk, I guess all bets are off, but Gates is part of that protected class. And, there was, people don't understand this, but we found that there was a NIAID person in Beijing for Fauci. The National Institutes of Allergic and Infectious Diseases. So that they had a person in Beijing, in China, monitoring the Chinese public health activities, including the Wuhan Institute. Well, one of the interesting emails that we had uncovered in investigating that whole issue was a report by Chen about a Belt and Road high-level meeting for health cooperation that she attended. And this is what she talked about with respects to the Gates Foundation. So this is not Judicial Watch. This is a government official who reports to Fauci, reporting on what Gates was up to in China. On the approach for leveraging China's resources to help others, Gates Foundation is working with Chinese government on donations to its neighboring countries and African countries such as anti-malarial medicines, bed nest diagnostics, etc. More specifically, it helps Chinese companies to gain pre-qualification on medications so that Chinese company manufactured drugs can be sold outside China, helps the Chinese to establish bilateral collaboration with specific countries in Africa, teaches the Chinese how to do resource mobilization, and helps raise China's voice of governance by placing representatives from China on important international councils as high-level commitment from China. So I don't know about you all, but that sounds to me pretty extraordinary to have the Gates Foundation, as disclosed here by this government document, acting as an agent for the Chinese government. in placing them in positions of influence to advance what certainly is not the U.S. interest, which is advancing this Silk Road Initiative, this Belt Road Initiative. Incredible material. And so I guess to all the listeners out there, look to see what already is out there, because what has been released is a relatively small group of documents out of one company about significant government and corporate misconduct. But there's tons of other documents out there from other entities such as Judicial Watch, members of Congress, et cetera. You all know where it all is. That has to be distributed to the marketplace as well in much more significant ways, because the media doesn't want to cover the fact that Fauci had someone essentially spying on the Chinese in China while funding the Chinese bio labs programs. They don't want you to talk about the fact that it's not just the FBI who was trying to get big tech to take down your content, but you had states doing it on the fly as well. They don't want anyone to talk about anything that isn't in the New York Times or Washington Post. That's why they want to control Twitter. That's why they want to control Facebook. That's why they want to control these other big tech platforms, because you get alternative access to information about what your government is up to from entities that are typically suppressed, like Judicial Watch and some of the others that are popping up. I see Project Veritas was, and James O'Keefe was finally back allowed on Twitter again. These folks are potentially very, very, very troublesome for the establishment that is not only national, but, as I say, transnational in nature.
Yeah,
Yes, Chronicle.
just to add to that, Tom,
Go ahead.
this connects it both to the Twitter censorship and corporate media censorship, right? If President Biden is compromised by Chinese or Ukrainian assets, which is forcing our hand in Ukraine or forcing us to basically be ineffective in combating China's rise on the geopolitical stage, this is a problem for everybody. And if it ends with the U.S. no longer being the sole superpower or losing the reserve currency 10, 15 years down the line and we are bankrupt, regardless of your political affiliation, you're going to be on the streets starving. Right. So at a certain point, you have to put partisan ideology behind you and say, can I trust the actors who are running the country? And to me, the answer is no, because these are the same entities that hid the laptop during Trump's Ukraine impeachment that had exculpatory evidence that was already verified. And now you look at the money flowing to Ukraine when how long did it take Flint to get clean water? What about Mississippi? Look at the border. What's coming over? This affects you every place. Under U.S. law, you're required to provide education to children, even if they're illegal. Well, if we have 6 million people coming in, how many school teachers do you have to hire? How many pensions are that? How many healthcare funds? How many ESL teachers? How many of them are going to have actual conditions that require special education? You are going to go bankrupt. The country is going to go bankrupt. This is at a same time where, regardless of what they say, the economy is in recession. You cannot find cheap housing. You cannot find cheap rentals. You go to the store, the prices are going up. You think competing against 6 million more mouths are going to help you put food on the table and make a better future for your children? You think paying higher taxes for people who don't even belong here? Like, this affects every facet of your life, but they have you laser focused on one thing. Nobody's saying don't be compassionate. Nobody's saying don't give refugees asylum, right? But there is no such thing as economic asylum, right? America has become a glorified Costco membership, right? You don't get to flee here based on crime or based on lack of economic opportunities. If that's the case, I know of a lot of American cities where people would like to flee to Scandinavian countries based on crime, based on lack of opportunity. So you have to look at these issues logically and say, well, where are we heading? Where are we heading when fentanyl overdose deaths are at all-time highs and they're killing America's youth and basically killing the Rust Belt? You have to ask yourself, what are these people who are telling you these euphemisms and giving you these lies? Do the actual end results match the policy and the rhetoric? And the answer, since the 1990s, whether it was H.W. Bush, whether it was Clinton, whether it was George W., or whether it was Obama, the answer is no. And if you can't see that at this point, then you have nobody to blame but yourselves when the end result comes.
You know what I think is interesting, and I'd be interested in Kim and Ian's take on this, since you and anyone else has any views. The latest Twitter dump, the Twitter Files 8, which, to bring everyone up to speed, I kind of, we just assume everyone's joining at one time, but Twitter Files 8 shows that the Pentagon had a series of front bots, mostly it looks like in Arabic accounts, that they created to try to influence countries abroad related to our war fighting in Russia, Syria, and elsewhere. I think that's a fair compilation. And Twitter knew that they were there, and they didn't do anything to shut them down or police them. Now, the question, I think what's interesting about this latest revelation is that the prior revelations have been not helpful to the left's narratives, which is to demand that content moderation and censorship be a primary focus of big tech media, and that it's the job of government to help them do that. And we see from politicians who were responding, in fact, they should be forced to do it in some respects through threats. But this is something that I think the left is, typically opposed to, right? Propaganda efforts by the military that may or may not be, but certainly because it is on an American platform, they can say, well, we were directing it overseas, but obviously, as Kim has pointed out, that American citizens can see it as well. What's the left's reaction to this going to be? Are they going to continue to keep their head in the sand and continue the cover up of the content of this material, or will they begin to ask questions? I say that rhetorically, thinking that it won't change things, but I'm wondering what others think about this. Because if this doesn't change things, I don't know what else would.
Yeah,
You're exactly right. This is so important that if nothing happens now, we're lost. It's game over. Like, we're literally going to live in a totalitarian world where our rights are meaningless.
You've always been at war with East Asia. That's a 1984 reference. But beyond that, I do see a lot of anti-war left people speaking out about this. And what's interesting is that Lee Fang's article on The Intercept that actually goes in depth into the Twitter files today, I recommend people read it, was co-written by Ken Klippenstein. And Ken Klippenstein, he and I are not friends. We don't like each other. But he did a good job here. And to my understanding, he is a leftist. So the fact that it was published on The Intercept, and they were willing to run this story that was very arguably anti-establishment, is interesting. I would hope to see influencers, people like Hasanabi and such, actually weigh in on this issue, because thus far they have been very anti-Elon Musk, just going after him for going after journalists and things like that. But this is way bigger than Elon Musk, right? This is about American foreign intervention, its foreign policy, and how they're using the military-industrial complex, which historically the left has been opposed to, and it has been the number one target of the left, to see them take action against this. I would like to see members of Congress, especially the Squad, or at least some members of it, maybe someone beyond Ro Khanna, right? Because he can't be the only person who's opposed to this. I would like to see other members, even the people I dislike, like AOC and Ilhan Omar, actually speak out against this, because they have in Congress spoken out against the military-industrial complex, although ultimately they did end up voting for supporting the war in Ukraine. I would like to see them actually wake up and or at least listen to their constituents. I think it's very important for their constituents to speak up and give them some phone calls and say, hey, be opposed to this. Like, this is a serious issue when the government, the deep state, is using bots to manipulate manipulate what am I saying? To manipulate the discourse on social media and make people for war in a way that is not um, beneficial to any U.S. taxpayer, much less to the people who are on the receiving end of those bombs, right? I mean, they claim to care about not going to war. They claim to care about helping people in the Middle East, all those black and brown people. Well, now's the time to speak up. And if they don't speak up, as Kim.com says, we're screwed, right? Like, the world is screwed if they control the narrative and they don't want to, like, move away from that U.S. foreign policy that is so pro-war. I think something really does need to change, and hopefully these files will present themselves as a shakeup of some sort.
Yeah, the problem is that it's not going to happen because people like the Squad are, I'll just say it, the most despicable part of this country, in my opinion, because, and they're the biggest hypocrites. Okay, you have Ilhan Omar who cries a foul every time anyone who's not as left wing as she is says anything that's not according to her principles, and plays the gender card. And yet we have the women of Iran being slaughtered, and she won't take a stance. And she is an Islamic Republic apologist. So I don't have respect for those people, and I don't think that they're ever going to do what you said, Ian. But what I do think is that what you said is extremely important. And what I want to say to people is, when you find out that stuff on, let's say, your side, let's be real, there are sides, right, isn't kosher. This is what I do when I advise, when I do crisis management. When you find out, don't shy away. Talk about it. Put the microscope on it, because you know you have to stick to the principles. You have to fight for the principles, not the people speaking, because you don't understand right now. If you're not worried about this, because ha ha ha, guess what? You guys suck. We had to sit through 8 years of Trump. We hated you guys. Now you know what? This blah blah blah. Guess what? That's just a formality. That's just the result was in your favor this time. The principle is what matters. You have to fight for the principle. If it's okay this time, you're setting a precedent. It's going to be okay next time. And you can't guarantee the results will always be in your favor. You've got to argue and fight for the principle. And if you are not seeing this, I really encourage you to not think about who's speaking these things up here, and think about what the content of the message actually is. Right? You shouldn't be censored. Doesn't matter if you hate what the other person is saying. I will try to fight for that person's freedom of speech, even if they tell me I'm the worst person in the world. That's okay. Right? That's okay, because you know what? If they can't do it, then I can't speak my mind either. Thanks.
I want to bring in a new voice here. George Schachtel is someone I don't think I've ever talked to Jordan, but he has a great take on Twitter. Something
I love Jordan. I love his tweets. He's awesome.
yeah,
Like, he was one of the first people to speak out against lockdowns. He's great.
yeah. Jordan's sharp and incisive, and I don't think I've seen what you've been talking about in terms of the Twitter files. But Jordan, join the conversation. I'd be interested to hear. There's this Twitter files dump number 8, and appreciate your point of view on the current crisis.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I think just to give this a 30,000-foot picture, my take on all of these releases, and a lot of us have been suspicious of this, is that basically the ruling class in the United States has, until the purchase of Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter, they've controlled all the levers of power and all the means of the dissemination of communication. And I think this is the biggest threat to the U.S. ruling class since Donald Trump became president, and you saw how ruthless they were with him over the course of his 4-year term. And I was just thinking about going back, and from the second that James Comey entered Obama's office with that dossier, it was absolute war. And I would expect that this is how the U.S. ruling class is going to approach Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter. I think that they'll try to do everything they can to weaken his position and get him out of there, get him to fold on at least some minute issues involving speech. And I think there's also interesting conversation going on about, what is the ideology here? And I don't really see this so much as an ideological battle, but it's basically there are members of the club and then there's everyone else. And when you're inside the club in the US ruling class, there are parameters within which you can debate issues. But when it comes to issues like we discussed, like funding the war, you notice that every single Democrat, regardless of if they're a traditional JFK Democrat, if there's any left, or a left-wing socialist like an AOC Ilhan Omar, they're all voting for it because they know what they have to do. And it's the same thing in the Republican Party. And I think that although there are Republicans who are not part of the club, the vast majority of Congress is part of that club. And in addition to that, it's just that it's just the Twitter files have revealed probably um, worse than our suspicions about how much the government controls the levers of power and communication in the United States. And it makes you really rethink what exactly is going on in this country, what stage the republic is in. And I just came in 20 minutes ago, but I think there's a lot of compelling thoughts here about the state of our monetary system, and I think that contributes a lot to it. And when you talk about the war in Ukraine, and we have this military industrial complex that was just refueled with $850+ billion, and now they're passing a $1.7 trillion omnibus. And you have these gigantic institutions, and you need to feed the beast constantly. And even if that means debasing the value of Americans' wealth, the administrative state in DC continues to grow at an exponential scale. And I think that is, if I were to take one thing out of this, that's the one thing that's become very clear to me, is that the greatest threat to the freedoms of Americans and perhaps everyone abroad is the American ruling class that has levered up this debased currency to such a degree that they're now threatening a global depression. And of course, Russia and China are far from innocent here. What I think is interesting about Twitter Files 8 specifically is that it basically revealed that everyone's doing the same thing with the black propaganda operations. I didn't see it as any type of like big um, scandal. It was just like, yeah, this is what everyone's doing, and all of these major world powers. What I'm becoming more and more convinced of is that these global superpowers, whether you're living in Russia, China, U.S., Iran, you're not getting the government that you deserve right now, and that's kind of just a common theme in history. And unfortunately, we're approaching some interesting times, some tough times ahead. But Tom, I appreciate you letting me take the stage, and I'll offer it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, George. What's frustrating? I want to go back to Musk, and not everyone here is a supporter of Trump, and I understand it's not about the politics. But as the head of a government watchdog group, an anti-corruption group, a group that helps support whistleblowers, sees government corruption in awful ways up close sometimes. I saw immediately what was going on with Trump was just outrageous in terms of the abuse of his civil liberties, the changing of the rules, the lawlessness that was being used by these agencies that are entrusted with significant powers by the American people, the FBI, the DOJ, et cetera. And at the time in 2017, when all of Washington, including many Republicans, said, we have to let the special counsel operate. Judicial Watch was virtually alone in saying this is all a scam. It's an abuse. There's no good faith basis for any of these investigations. It's all a lie. Everything that has been vindicated, not because it was new information, but because, it just people began to accept that the information that Trump had done nothing wrong was always there, and they were just lying about it. And I just see that happening again with Musk, and I see Musk, doing something in good faith and receiving virtually no support from anyone, present company accepted. And what I think is particularly remarkable, Jordan, I like your reaction to this, and everyone, this is something I've been harping on in these spaces earlier, is the lack of Republican leadership support and a kind of providing a veil of protection to Musk over the abuse and retaliation he's suffering from the Biden administration and members of Congress. where's the leadership in defending Musk for advocating for the free speech rights of mostly, in practical terms, Republicans? I mean, am I being unfair to the Republicans and thinking they're dropping the ball on this just as they did with Trump in the early days?
I've seen quite a few interviews of Republican lawmakers that are saying they are supporting what he did and they are thankful to him and that they want to investigate this. So there are definitely quite a few that are talking out in Elon's favor.
Yeah, there's
am
certainly.
I being unfair, Jordan, too, or what do you think?
No, not at all. I mean, there's certainly maybe a couple dozen Republicans in Congress, but look what's on the agenda. You know, tomorrow they're holding a celebration of democracy and having Zelensky speak in prime time in front of a joint session of Congress. And Mitch McConnell just said today that the most important issue for Republicans is giving $45 billion more dollars to Ukraine. And you know, I'm only in my early 30s, but I've never witnessed in my entire life a greater separation between the interests of the average American citizen and what is going on in DC. And I lived in DC for quite some time. And, you know, that was one of the reasons why I left, is because that town has become so ridiculous and so detached from the American citizens, whether financial or family interest, personal interests, that it's just a total clown show. And I think you're right that Elon Musk has not gotten the credit he deserves, and I hope that at least behind the scenes there are some legislators that are interested in working with him on, you know, continuing to expose this stuff. Thanks.
Plus, the other thing is, other than the bots who have been voting against him, there is a huge amount of people that are supporting him, that see what's happening here. And, you know, I see it every day in the replies that he's getting to his tweets, you know, in the likes that his tweets are getting. There are definitely a shit ton of people out there that appreciate very much what he's doing.
Right. Well, there's no doubt that there's a grassroots support. Who wants to speak here? Saeed Sirish, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Hi. I'm basically here to speak about the boats, but I also would like to comment on what Jordan spoke. So, being Syrian who lives in the Middle East, and while we read content from media in several languages from different regions from the East and West, we always observed and saw how the English content, basically coming from the US, is always based toward more wars, toward one-sided. Like always, it's Russia that is the only evil. Always there is support for military action against Iraq, against the Middle East, which result in, you know, selling more weapons, more oil production, and so on. So I'm glad that something finally happened, like the Twitter files, which is like a wake-up call for the American who always believe that they have a free journalism, so they can wake up and see that every media in every country or region is somehow influencing specific parties in the governing bodies or their political views. Back to the bot. I have a question for Kim. So we know, you know, creating 5 accounts, 10 accounts, or whatever can be somehow doable. But when you speak about an army of bots, the registration, the creation of tens of thousands of email addresses, the registration of them, and then flowing content between them coming from different IP addresses and so on. Do you think this is something that is created with the help in the back end of Twitter, or it's just that the Twitter red team and blue team did not invest properly in behavior analysis and to prevent such type of bot? Because this also could be an answer of how other social media are being manipulated, like Facebook, which is uh, more hard to be having bots, let's say, compared to Twitter. So, what is your input about this?
Well, first of all, it has been made clear in the Twitter Files 8 release today that the US government is sending lists of accounts for white listing, meaning these accounts are not going to be touched, they're not going to be removed. If an moderator clicks on one of these accounts, there will be immediately like a red bar on top, don't touch this account, right? So Twitter is, of course, assisting in protecting these accounts that are used for propaganda around the world. But here's something that is even worse. The intelligence community, through their mass surveillance, basically has every account with every password for any social media, any email account around the world, because they have access to all your data. Like anything that you've ever done on the internet in the last 10 years is now sitting in a spy cloud that 5 countries share, the Five Eyes. So if they need 100,000 accounts out of the blue that have, years of history, what they're going to do, they're just going to go into their database, look for accounts that have been dormant for many years, and just activate them and use them. They don't even have to go and create 100,000 accounts fresh, which would be visible, which you could easily detect. They're just simply going into their spy cloud and getting the accounts that they need out of there. And then you have a very diverse number of accounts that used to be real accounts that have different creation dates and that are just not being used. So it's okay for the intelligence community to utilize them as bots. But that is how easy it is. It's not just sitting there creating new accounts.
And where are they done? Where are they operating from? Who? Is it China? Is it Middle Europe? Where?
No, I mean, they will, of course, have different data centers in different countries. So they can make their bots look like they're coming from all these different geolocations. So the US government is investing enormous amounts into their data centers. And for example, the spy cloud in Utah has the capacity to store all human communications for the next 50 years, all emails, SMSs, voice, everything. Uh, People don't understand or realize that anything that you say, just like when you look at this Twitter space right now, and you have this feature on where it turns speech to text, that is a technology that the US government is using for over 10 years. So people who think that they're actually storing audio recordings of everyone having a call, no, they're just converting it into text, and then it's fully searchable in the entire database body that they have in the spy cloud. So every communication that you ever had over the phone in the last 10 years is sitting there in text format and is fully searchable and can then be analyzed.
Well, I've always presumed that. So to test the new bot, I don't know if the new bot system is in place or the new anti-bot polling system, but Elon Musk just posted a tweet a few minutes ago. Should Congress approve the $1.7 trillion omnibus spending bill, which for those of you outside the United States is a temporary measure. I don't know how long is it, Jordan? What is it, 9 months now? That will essentially fund the government or aspects of the government for 9 months. And he replies, bots incoming, to his own tweet. So currently it's running 75% no, which is probably what it would have been. It's strange how that poll so obviously brings out conservative voices to participate, and the fact that his poll about him remaining the head of Twitter didn't. Boy, that there was something about that was not like the other polls. That's for sure. That certainly suggests that. And the other Elon Musk news of the day, I thought that's interesting. In addition to the Twitter file drop, again yesterday, the FBI giving $3.5 million at least to Twitter to spy on and censor Americans, act as an informant against you, dear American, dear Twitter user. And then today, the disclosure that Twitter knew that there were bots trying to influence policy, but they were directed at foreigners, so they didn't care, and they were created by the Pentagon. But he highlighted something in response to or called out Adam Schiff on. I just had his tweet up there. Maybe someone can pull it more quickly than I can that can read. Oh, yes, he wrote to Twitter. He initially tweeted out for part 7, his retweet read, "Government paid Twitter millions of dollars to censor info from the public." That's a charitable interpretation of it, although outrageous. And then he replies to that tweet, "As outgoing chair of House Intelligence, did you approve hidden state censorship and direct violation of the Constitution of the United States, Adam Schiff?" Now, Schiff has put himself out there as a critic of Musk. He threatened Musk the other day that there would be legislative changes to hold his company and other big tech companies liable if they didn't keep censoring the way they wanted it. But one thing that many people don't know about Schiff is that he did this type of spying on his own through Congress. And, we've highlighted the kind of the intelligence state spying on Americans. But under the Pelosi Congress, they've expanded their purview, and it's accelerated under the January 6th committee, to include the ability, at least during the impeachment of Trump, they took it upon themselves to secretly issue subpoenas without court authorization, so just on their own power, to telephone companies targeting Trump's lawyers and others, and they took those phone records and then published them. And we had sued for access to those records, and they said they essentially had authority to do what they wanted, and no court could over either require the disclosure of the subpoenas or even supervise what they were doing. So the Congress, the Pelosi House, told the court, and we couldn't get the documents, that they had the power to do these secretive subpoenas, and there's nothing any American could do to find out what they were up to. And so, that's a pretty extraordinary assertion of legislative power, and it's one that I think is at odds with our Republican form of government. But I just want folks to know that the critics of Trump, of Musk, are have authoritarian tendencies, and it's not just free speech they don't like. It's the right to petition your government they don't like. It's freedom of association they don't like. And these core civil liberties are under attack in at least modern America in ways. You'd have to go back. I was thinking to the World War I era, where we had some laws that were passed by the Wilsonians to suppress their political opposition. I think one has to go back that far for anything similar. But in terms of the reach and scope and suppression, in terms of the sheer numbers of people, there's nothing to compare in modern history, at least in the American on the American side, with what the government's been doing in terms of them thinking they have the right to suppress speech, and that's what these Twitter files are showing. And the fact the media is ignoring it is just despicable. Yes, thanks.
Yeah, to that, I wanted to say, when you have to redefine something to make it legal, right? When it's no longer dictatorial tendencies, it's now we're doing this. Oh no, it's not that. It's this because of the ends that you're trying to reach. That's a huge red flag, and I see that happening all the time here. And then I wanted to ask Kim a question. In the prior space, Kim, you said something about part of the process was taking over actual real accounts. Can you explain that again? Thanks.
You mean what I just said 15 minutes ago, or in the other space?
No,
I don't.
in the other space, you said one of the things they do is they take over actual real accounts. Do they like computerize them, or what do they do? Do they that make them go on automation, or what do they do with those?
So I think I was talking about the NAFO bots, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a 3-layer approach that the CIA has with NAFO bots. One is they have a group of people that are real people that really believe in the cause of Ukraine, and they kind of got them into this NAFO group with these dogs that they're using, as an avatar, and they're just basically normal people, about 3,000 to 3,500 of them, which I call the legitimate front end. And then there's the illegitimate back end, which is automated bots. But then there's another back end, which is real people that work in the intelligence community, over 100,000 of them, that have access to 30 to 40 Twitter accounts each. So they're using the legitimate front end that looks all normal to basically be the NAFO face. But then when they are tweeting stuff um, against people that are having other opinions about the war, that are calling it a proxy war, that are saying, is Ukraine really worth risking a nuclear war? Shouldn't we be negotiating for peace like Elon did? Elon said, hey, let's have peace in Ukraine. And he made a proposal. And then he was attacked by these NAFO bots. So what happens? These front end people are saying something, and then they get amplified by the max by these bots in the background. So they give them huge likes, they make sure that they get more visibility, and if there are any polls or whatever, they're going in and skewing them in favor of their agenda. So for example, there are a couple of CIA operatives, and I named them in the other space that we had, that are making tweets, about Ukraine, and they end up with 40, 50, 60,000 likes. And these are small accounts that only even have the amount of people or the amount of visibility. They're like unknown people. And, one guy who has quite a big ego and is the head of the whole NAFO operation, he's a CIA operative who spends a lot of time in Ukraine. He gets these tens of thousands of likes. But then, for example, when he hosts a Twitter space where, obviously real people join to talk, then he has only a couple hundred people. Or when there was a chat that a government funded think tank did with NAFO, where they were basically putting it on their hashtag saying, hey, we're going to have this live interview, and we're going to get patted on the back for all the great work that we do. And there were literally only 115 people watching this. So NAFO pretends to be this massive group of people that are all supporting Ukraine. But when you can measure it, where bots cannot join, when they are not going on YouTube to watch a live stream, you see that the real numbers are actually minimal. And that exposes that the whole back end is illegitimate and is just a botting.
So I just want to, having heard that again, I just want to emphasize how vital it is that Elon's tackling these issues. I was hired a few months ago by a company, of a quite well-established company in Web3, that was sabotaged. And I just want to explain, we did this sort of undercover thing. We found out who was doing it. They were botting their account, and we went undercover, and we posed as sort of created this account, posed as sort of a potential client of theirs. So I just want to say a couple things. They can do, yes, they can vote, right, in polls. They can they can retweet, and believe it or not, they can start to comment. The comments are not sophisticated, right, but it is still related to the subject matter, right? So it won't be about, like, if it's the poll is about Ukraine, if it's going to be a comment, it'll be a brief comment, but it won't be like about apple pie, right? It'll be something relevant. So it's not going to catch people. People aren't going to catch it. And the other thing I wanted to say is there's that element, and there's so much time and money being spent on that. Then there's another thing, right? And this is what happened to my client. There's another thing where, you can actually tell these people that you want to sabotage someone else, right? Whether you want to sabotage their poll or their account, and you get obvious fake bots, and you can bot their account, you can bot their poll or whatever. And then what they do, and this is what they did to my client, and what they do is they say, hey, look at you guys. You guys bought your followers. You guys are bots. You're not real. You must be liars. You must be, breaking the law and this and that. So they use that, which they set up, right? They set up, they paid for, and sometimes it's a competitor, believe it or not, to send bots their way, and they can vote on polls, they can retweet, they can like, and they can sometimes comment. And it is so easy, and it is so cheap. It's so cheap. And so it is very concerning. So we have two fronts. One is they're getting very sophisticated on the front of they're actually kind of looking like real, right? And on the other front, they're actually on purpose looking fake and then calling someone out. And I'm just really happy that Elon's working on this, because the level of sabotage here is just out of control.
And this is why the
Product.
government is now out of
Yep.
control, because they want to prevent Elon from succeeding, taking this massive asset away from them. They don't want to lose this power of propaganda and screwing public opinion and manipulating people into believing that this war is great. If they lose this, like I said earlier, the war in Ukraine will have a very short shelf life.
Prodigal, did you have a point you wanted to make?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on Ukraine, then I got to head out because it's been a couple of hours. I mean, when you look at these actors guiding this policy, and if you take a realpolitik approach, the policies are insane, right? You look at what's been going on in Ukraine, the escalation even before the conflict, and they're telling you Russia's a threat to the world, but at the same time, they constantly brag how it's getting their ass kicked, and it's one or the other. I don't think Russia has any intentions of touching a NATO state. They would be insane to do so. But the propaganda says otherwise. And when you look at the off ramp, there is no off ramp right
May
now.
I interrupt you for a second?
What happened?
Yeah, Elon Musk just replied to me when I tweeted spaces are unstable, keep crashing and bugging out today when we try to discuss the drop of the new Twitter files involving the DOD. He just replied to it. He said he's looking into it.
He's on the
Good.
case. Great news.
Yep, he's on the
That's
case.
good.
He's on the case right now. Yeah,
I
good
mean,
stuff, man. Like I love this dude. Like he listens to us. Very cool. Very cool.
there's no off ramp from where we're going, and we're starting to butt heads with a nuclear power. Right now, it's been confirmed via the New York Times and another organization that both the U.S. military, whether through CIA contractors, and also the UK military, is operating in Ukraine, right, on an individual state level. These are both still NATO members, right? You look at where this is going. The Nord Stream pipeline sabotage. It was investigated, and they said it was clear sabotage. If they had evidence to show it was Russia, they would have announced it to the world. When you look at the need for free flow of information, people on Twitter and a lot of anons were quick to show that the stray missile that hit Poland was from the Ukraine S-300 system, because it only has a radius of about 60, 70 miles. But if they controlled the flow of information, we could have been in a nuclear war with Russia within a day.
That's
This is
exactly
stuff.
right. It was Twitter
Very
that
good point.
debunked it, right? It
Yeah,
was Twitter that
yeah, it
debunked
was
the whole
Twitter.
thing.
AP News cited an unnamed CIA source, and later he got filed because he didn't cover his tracks good enough. But it was Anon, OPSEC, and other Twitter people who showed that there was no way this was a stray Russian missile. So I
Yep.
mean, you look at where
And then
this is
and then
going.
again on Twitter, a photographer posted the pictures of the rocket, of the missile fragments, and they could immediately identify what they were. So Twitter kind of spoiled the whole plot.
So where is the off ramp, right? There is no off ramp. They don't want an off ramp, and this isn't just a war with Ukraine on the ground, right? This is a geopolitical, economic war that is stressing. Even if the West is going to make out of it fine, just with increased inflation and less choice of goods at the supermarket, we are bleeding the third world and emerging markets dry. Africa, in the last year, has 90 more people approximately at the edge of starvation. I know we care about Ukraine, but do we not care about Sri Lanka? Do we not care about Somalia? Do we not care about these other countries where they're going to basically be starving to death and unable to basically have electricity and be able to actually have healthcare and medical treatment? This is not something you can view in a vacuum. This is something you have to view overall, and you have to see what the end game is. And if we can't have free conversations and see what's going on, it's going to be a very big problem. And it could end up, and God forbid, a nuclear winter, a nuclear war. Over what? Both sides can come to the table to have peace. There's been multiple reporting that a peace deal could have been reached back in April, but Boris Johnson flew to Ukraine and basically put it to rest. You listen to NATO, and they constantly say that this is going to grow and that it might grow larger, and we can't have peace. What is the end game? What is the off ramp? And it seems right now uh, the West does not have a game plan in regards to de-escalation and trying to come to terms. And this isn't just about Ukraine; it's about the whole world. So I think people should strongly consider this, at least when they look at this situation. And remember my words when you see people starving to death in Africa: children, women, babies. This is all in play, and it's something that people should consider. This shouldn't be considered in a vacuum. I got to head out.
And
But I
there are
appreciate
people
your comments.
starving to death here in America.
No,
Yeah.
I agree. I
And
agree.
they're
I think
freezing
our
to death in
focus right.
Europe. Freezing to death in Europe. Nobody talks about that, but refugees are freezing to death because there's just not enough electricity to keep people warm. It's insanely expensive. Like, ask anyone who lives in England right now, and they'll tell you their bills have skyrocketed by like 400%. That is food that's not on their table, right? That's insane. That is absolutely insane.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the leadership transition that Musk has signaled in his tweeting over the last few days. Lex Friedman, who is, I guess, an MIT researcher, he runs a podcast. I don't know much about him other than he popped up in the news recently as offering to run Twitter for Musk. He writes today, sadly, I've been attacked a lot over the last 2 days. For example, my Wikipedia page was edited to mostly remove my time at MIT. I'm a research scientist at MIT, working there since 2015. I love it. The people there are amazing. The attacks aren't fun, but I remain optimistic, and he has a heart at the end of it. So this is a guy who put himself out there. He's obviously an ally, a friend of Musk. The left wants to destroy Musk, and that part of that methodology means going after his allies, friends, and families. But what does this say about his ability to recruit someone to come in and take over what I would submit is an inherently political position, given the public interest here, to help him run Twitter?
But first of all, I think it wasn't his intention to lose that poll. I think he underestimated how many bots there still are. So that was a learning curve for him. I don't think he's going to step down. It makes no sense. He's put in $44 billion. He wants to recoup his investment, and he's learning. He's in a new domain. This is all new to him. He's a genius. He's a visionary. He is very quick in adapting to new situations. But you got to give him some time because this is all very new to him. The other thing is, not even Jack, who was the CEO of this company before, has managed to make it profitable. And I never understood this. Like, my businesses, at one point, my companies were in control of 4% of global internet traffic with many hundred millions of users. I know how to monetize mass users. I could never understand how Jack wasn't able to make Twitter a profitable company, But you see Elon making the right moves with introducing premium services, with adding additional features where people will be able to host long form video, maybe even live streaming. He's really opening Twitter up with great premium services to switch from an advertising model to a premium model. And I see absolutely no reason why Elon shouldn't achieve within a year a profitable Twitter. It's in my mind, it's a no-brainer. But for him to be in the situation where he is now attacked because he is opening up all the wrongdoing, he's exposing everything that was wrong about Twitter, which also, by the way, held it back. Like all of these censorship activities and shadow banning have moved a lot of Twitter users away to other platforms. Parler, True Social. And some of these people have now built new engagement there with new followers there. They may not even want to come back to Twitter. So it was detrimental to the company that Twitter did that.
Yeah, yeah. I personally, Parler for me doesn't work. It's I've tried to use it, but it's just wonky as a system. I like True Social. I like the energy there. I think it's kind of a fun platform. Seems to work well. It's pretty simple. But Twitter has an unusual reach, which is very difficult to compete with. So, Kim, you're thinking that he's not going anywhere. That we shouldn't expect someone to come in as a day-to-day manager to replace him anytime soon.
Unless he wants to write off $44 billion and just call this, a nice little adventure. Absolutely not. Like, he can't afford it. And the next problem he will have is there's maybe a handful of people who understand this business and who understand how to monetize it. When you are in this mass user environment, there's literally not a lot of people who understand this business, right? So it's not like any of the companies that he's been building or dealt with in the past, not even when he was, still coding himself, working at PayPal and things like that. This is completely different. And it will just take him some time. But the good thing is that he has the mind to comprehend all of this. He's learning quickly. And these few mistakes that he's made since he's taken over, I'm sure are not going to happen again. He's the kind of guy who learns quickly from mistakes and adjusts course accordingly. So, he will have to remain CEO for some time, at least until Twitter is profitable.
Ian, what's your thinking on the current status of the leadership issues that Musk himself has raised? And I think as I was suggesting earlier, he's kind of walked back a little bit from that. But it wouldn't surprise me. He's probably thinking for some partners there to come in there to ease the burdens there. What's your thinking?
I'm thinking that he still hasn't found a right guy yet. He needs someone who has the same kind of vision, who shares his vision of what Twitter can be, and also has the ability to lead these technical, very engineering-oriented teams. And I don't think there's the guy yet. Like, he's the only guy who can do it right now. I think in the long term, maybe 3-6 months or something, he might find somebody. But right now, he still has to stabilize Twitter as a platform. I mean, as he told me, Twitter just doesn't have a core functionality. It's just not there yet. They don't even have the tools to properly moderate people, right? Or properly even log moderation. So that's something they need to work on first. Build the infrastructure, allow for video publishing, content creation. And this is something he has addressed multiple times. Even in a recent tweet to me just a couple of days ago, he agreed with what I said, that Twitter cannot be profitable unless it has content creation or content creators using the platform. And right now, there's just no reason for any content creators to want to use it because they can't monetize their content. That's as simple as that, right? So once he gets those systems in place, then maybe he can step back a little bit, delegate it to somebody else, someone like the woman who runs SpaceX. I mean, she does an amazing job with it. He needs somebody like that and teams in place for all of the engineering departments to be able to do that. Right now, I don't think he has that ability yet because they're still going through a lot of this whole backlog of people applying to work at the company. So I think that if anything, he will probably promote internally. He won't be looking for someone externally. He needs somebody who intrinsically understands the systems. And so this may take a few months because you want to see who rises up within those ranks, who understands the systems, who understands them as implicitly as he does. And I think that's where he will actually find the next big mind to run Twitter.
Yeah, Tom, it will also take somebody who has the courage and the fearlessness to step into the fold, because the attacks that are now happening against Elon are going to happen to anyone who's taking over the leadership role and sticks to this approach. So if Elon switches to the chairman of the board or some position like this, he will still want this to be the freedom of speech platform. He will still want to expose any kind of wrongdoing or future attacks by the government, and to find someone who has an understanding how to monetize a mass user site, how to introduce new products that make premium services really attractive for users, and at the same time have the willingness to risk everything that they have built in the past for being pro free speech and against these kind of moves. That is going to be really tough. So Elon, in my mind, he doesn't really have much of a choice. He will have to stick to this job for a while.
I know many of my supporters on Twitter have quite kindly suggested I be CEO of Twitter. That ain't going to happen. I'm happy to be running Judicial Watch, but Kim lays out the kind of the requirements, I think, quite well about the sort of person. Of course, who fits that requirement the best right now? Elon Musk, right? He's found his guy. It's him.
Yeah,
and the other name that's been out there is Blake Masters. And about an hour ago, he put out a series of tweets. Blake Masters had run for governor or senator.
He ran for Senate seat.
Senate seat, yes. You would think as a political maven the way I am, I would know all this off the top of my head, but I'm not as...
There's no fight that guy could lead Twitter. Like I said...
This is his response I thought was interesting. Blake said, don't think I'd want the Twitter job, which obviously is not a saying no. It's probably a world of pain, 10 times more brutal than running for federal office, LOL, and can think of several others, Musk himself, David Sachs, who would be better at it anyways. But if I were CEO, this is how I think about it. And this is, I think, the kind of the analysis worth considering for the listeners here. First, free speech. The basic principle here is that anything goes unless it's illegal or literally putting someone in physical danger. This policy would protect a lot of ugly and unreasonable speech. So be it. No central authority at this scale should police speech. I suspect Elon Musk brought Twitter mainly because the pendulum had swung too far in one direction. The previous regime was too ideological and untrustworthy. They traded long-term cultural stability and healthy discourse for short-term political power by silencing their enemies, which is, I think, a very cogent point. No need to elaborate on why free speech is important, he goes on to write. Others have hashed that out long before us. But this part from Hayek, Hayek, for those of you who want to look him up, Friedrich Hayek, had stuck with me since high school. Many solutions to our current problems today are probably outside the overturned window. And the Hayek quote is, we shall not achieve its ends, liberties, if we could confine liberty to the particular instances that we know it will do good. He underlines, if we knew how freedom would be used, the case for it would largely disappear. If it is not also granted where the rules, the uses made of it by some do not seem desirable, it is therefore no argument against individual freedom that it's frequently abused. So the kind of a libertarian approach there. Second, product, and this is going to Kim's point, Twitter is incredible. I remember law school classmates in 2010 thinking I was crazy for seeing its potential then, but it's also more or less unchanged in a decade. Focus is a virtue, but stagnation is not. Twitter has not lived up to its potential. Good product design is like sculpting a statue. You can't start chiseling away and hope for the best, but if you are clear about what it is, and then it becomes possible to excavate the vision from the stone. Twitter is real-time information network. That's what it is. It's begun to decentralize, quote, the news, or the news, he capitalizes, but its artificially limited scope has prevented it from being more than it could be. Apple is so powerful because they have designed a system of complementary products. Imagine if Apple had been so pleased with the iPod that it basically just stopped making stuff after that. Well, that's what more or less what Twitter did. If Twitter wants to excavate its David, it should fill its feeds with complementary products. IG, TikTok, and now, to some degree, YouTube's are fighting over short form content. Twitter started as the short form content. Now it must develop and monetize longer form stuff on top. So he goes on. I'm not going to read every single tweet, but finally, the business side. I think in the medium and long term, the above approach would make Twitter profitable and way more valuable. So, what do you think, Kim? And I went on a little bit there, but Masters is being suggested by many influencers as someone that should be considering here, and he's obviously been thinking about Twitter.
Yeah, but no chance. He doesn't need an influencer. He doesn't need someone who comes out of politics. He needs someone who understands, for example, data security, who understands, how to innovate in the space, with a developer background, who understands, the managing of bots, like understanding how to solve that problem in a permanent fashion. And for that, steps have to be taken that may be a bit radical to get it under control. Like every user should have the requirement to log in with two-factor authentication. I think it's good to, enforce, for example, premium membership in low monetization countries. So countries that are bot heavy, like let's say Eastern European countries, or even Russia, or other nations that are not really generating a lot of revenue but have a thick bot population. Those countries I would make premium only. I would do things to make sure that in those markets that are costing me the most, creating me the most issues, I eliminate that by putting in drastic measures that make it impossible for those nations to be the bot hubs, right? So there are so many things that you need to consider when running Twitter, and then understanding, how to innovate and how to make sure that you can monetize all these users. This politician cannot do that. There's no question about this. I think there's a handful of people that can do this, and I think very few of them are willing to take the risk to come on board in this toxic environment, where now everyone who's going to go along with Elon's vision will be significantly and heavily attacked. Elon can deal with it because he has two things that you have to bring if you want to have this job. He hates bullies, and he will stand up to bullies. That is something, that's an attribute that he has, where he just has the strength to say, no matter what it takes, if I know I'm right and you're doing something that is not just, then I will stand my ground and I will fight you. That is such a strong attribute that he brings to Twitter, which I admire, because he's putting everything on the line. Don't forget it. Like all his other businesses may suffer from these multiple attacks that are being launched against him to try and stifle his approach and make sure that he falls in line and shuts the fuck up, right? So, for someone to take this job, they need to have a similar willpower and a similar attitude towards bullies.
Well,
Also, I wanted.
go ahead.
Sorry.
I want to highlight things first. I'll let you go next. The House Ways and Means Committee, which has jurisdiction over the Internal Revenue Service here in the United States, just voted to release Donald Trump's confidential private tax returns. There can't be a person in America, certainly someone of influence and wealth, who isn't looking at that and thinking, you know what, all bets are off in this country anymore. The politicians can take and release my tax returns now at the drop of a hat. What an abuse of power! And it's, to me, I've said it once, I'll say it again. Our republic is tottering. Sphinx.
Thanks, Tom. You know, the only thing I wanted to say was the what you read, the tweet, the politician's tweet. I apologize. I'm blanking on his name. Masters, I think, his tweet. So I think we all know that Elon is a very, very, very bright person. So I think he sees this kind of thing and says, okay, you just told me you didn't want the job and then literally sent me your cover letter explaining your principles and why you'd be a great fit with your principles in a tweet. So like, I don't think that's what Elon wants at all. You know?
I don't want the job, but here's what I'd do if I had it. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I just would
And
like
let's be
to add
honest,
something.
you just can't trust a politician to run your business.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the
it
last
seems
type of
like the
class of
opposite.
people.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of what Elon's been doing. And then this guy goes, I don't want the job, but I'm going to spend 10 minutes of your time and tell you why I believe in it.
Well, you know, it's
Uh,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think there is something also about Elon taking over Twitter is that he understood the product more than Jack did. I mean, the guy is an influencer. I run an influencers marketing agency, and I see that he understood Twitter more than Jack. He already has, I think, 100 million before he purchased, while Jack has like six. So he did what the platform need. He just created content. He engaged with the people. He create memes. So if someone need to come after Elon, he should have the same pattern in running things. Because if you look at Twitter as a product, nothing really has been added since before, except for the videos. I mean, spaces were here before, videos were here, live views came in, all with the administrative of Jack. But what Elon did is he used it as a social media platform, not as an aggregator, as it was built for. Maybe if somebody will come as a successful CEO, he should be someone with a similar followers and type of content, someone like when Donald Trump used to tweet, who can do memes, who can do conversation, who can spark dialogues between different parties. That's what I think it should be, like someone who understand the business of influencers and social media work.
You know,
I
and,
think
and
one thing that is pretty clear is that Elon bought Twitter because he loves it. He is one of the key users that drives most of the traffic. His tweets are super popular, and he just loves it. It's his hobby, it's his passion. It's such a cool way to communicate, and he's also educating a lot of people how to communicate on Twitter, right? And he's really mastered it. So I think the number one reason why he bought it is he didn't want to lose it to all this bullshit that is happening, and he loves it.
and as someone who uses Twitter a lot too, I can see it changing almost daily. New features, a new presentation. I just noticed on the web app, there's an insights. The insights bar, the little graph bar you click on, has been moved in a way that's more readily apparent and accessible. Just more tweaks. And obviously, that's someone who's, not sitting on their laurels in terms of making this system work better. The advertising is interesting. One's tempted to buy that crazy wrench that seems to work for everything. I didn't see ads like that before. I never saw any ads that I was interested in.
Yeah, I see
Practically
video
speaking.
ads, which is interesting. I mean, finally, like it caters to my interest. It shows me tech ads now because it sees, that I watch or tweet a lot about tech stuff. And before it would show me some travel ads. Well, I don't travel very often. What's the point of showing me this, right? Also, I brought up Bricksuit. He's more familiar with Blake Masters than maybe anybody else on the panel here. So he had some stuff that he wanted to say about
Okay,
Blake
that's a good
Masters.
idea. Thank you. Hey, Brick, good to have you.
Hey, I just want to point out, Blake Masters has a significant background in tech. He was working with Peter Thiel, and before he started his campaign for Senate, and this is the only election that he's ever ran for, is this current contest for Senate in Arizona. He was a technologist, so I don't believe that you can easily dismiss Blake Masters as a politician, ergo, he is incapable of running a business that has a technological bent. Blake Masters is also has a very strong philosophical understanding of the type of issues that affect communication and what, First Amendment issues in America, particularly Section 230 and that type of regulation. So I just don't think that you can categorically say he's not qualified on the basis that he ran for office and won election.
Okay, so first of all, he was a venture capitalist. So that was his main activity before he became a politician. And what really worries me about him is that he is a protege of businessman Peter Thiel. Now, anyone who understands who Peter Thiel is knows that this guy is writing applications for spy agencies to more efficiently manage and data mine the mass surveillance data that they are collecting. So Peter Thiel is probably the last guy you want to have as a person of influence over Blake Masters, given his own history with his companies that are literally supporting the deep state.
Yeah, and Blake in the beginning, he said it sounds like Elon Musk is the best person to be running Twitter. I mean, that strikes me to be the case too. But you know what? As a conservative, I don't pretend to know how to run every company in the country, unlike most of my fellow Denzians here in Washington D.C. And so, as Kim has pointed out, it's Elon's money on the line here, so he's going to make the decisions. And those of us in the peanut gallery should be treated with the appropriate relevance. I guess that's the nice way of putting it. I think I want to try to bring this in for a landing. What do you all think, Kim and Ian?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one more thing. So Blake's middle name is Gates. That disqualifies him.
Uh-oh.
Well, I want to apologize. Everyone, was trying to speak, and I was like, I couldn't figure out this is my first time hosting the spaces. I wasn't aware that there were these large numbers of people requesting to speak. So I wasn't necessarily ignoring you. I probably would have had to, practically speaking, given the large number. But I wasn't aware that because I got this, you get this notice that there's 100 people wanting to speak. I wasn't sure where they all were, and they were right in front of my face. I couldn't figure that out. So I wasn't purposely ignoring you. And the next time, it probably will be a purposeful ignoring you, because I don't think I can manage 100 people wanting to speak.
Do you want to move some people up so we can hear some other voices?
No, I think we have enough room, but I'm now that I'm more comfortable running it, I know how to bring people up in a more regular way and get some alternative voices in. So, next up, what do you think we can expect next from the Twitter files?
Well, I mean, all this stuff is already so explosive, and as I understand it, and as it was described in the Twitter files today, the process that they are going through is that they have full access to all files within the Twitter database. So every email, every message, any kind of documents that they have received. And I think the process is that they go through that in real time with a lawyer, looking at things. So we can expect much more. Like, we're literally early days. There's so much more to discover and uncover. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's Twitter files 42 in a couple of months. The other thing is the aftermath of all of these releases is what I'm really looking forward to, because there will be investigations in the House. I know of a couple of people that had their accounts censored, that they are organizing in groups now to take legal action about that, maybe even class action lawsuits. And I think they will be targeting the government. They will not necessarily target Twitter. They will go after the FBI. They will go after the administration that has allowed all of this, to take place with, questionable methods, paying Twitter to do this kind of stuff. Elon tweeted that just now. basically making the point that Twitter has been paid to censor people. So, there's a lot more coming down the road because of these releases, and that's really what I'm looking forward to. Imagine, some beautiful litigation with depositions of all of these FBI people, with discovery of documents internally within the DNC, within the political party, the Democratic Party, about what was discussed internally, to how to deal with Twitter, how to make sure that we can cover up this Hunter Biden story. I mean, there will be a lot of juicy stuff, I'm sure.
Ian.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I was reading text.
Yeah, what do you think we can expect next? I think Kim did a pretty good job, so don't feel like you have to speak if you're.
Right. Yeah. No. I think what we can expect next is I think we're going to see a lot of calming down. Fewer split-second decisions being made, and I think we're going to see the introduction of more features. Because when I just tried to upload a video, it actually showed me a little warning there at the bottom saying that, hey, don't close this browser window because it will cause your video to not show up. So that's a new thing. That wasn't there before. So it's like I think
Yeah.
they're adding new features piecemeal, and that's a really good thing. Yeah. It's helping a lot of users get used to these features as well, which is good.
Yeah, and I think the Twitter stuff, as you're pointing out, Kim, is going to be coming out in perpetuity, potentially, given the volume of records and topics. The big question to me is, will we be able to extract similar records from Facebook and Google? Now, Facebook runs Instagram as well under Meta, obviously, and Google is YouTube. And TikTok I'm putting off to the side because I see that as a foreign operation that it's a whole host of different issues. And although they treat them as an asset as well, it's pretty clear in recent months. And so is Congress, because I don't think they're going to voluntarily do what Musk did. That's not going to be in the offing. But the question is Congress going to be aggressive enough and willing to force out of the agencies and Facebook and Meta and Google similar records? Because that's where you're going to see the astonishing nature of the breadth and scope of this. Because relatively speaking, and I know based on conversations I've had, just generally in my work, is that Twitter is small potatoes compared to Facebook in terms of the number of users and just the whole operation. And Facebook is, we know just from the platform, Facebook is a much more sophisticated operation. And we know over at YouTube, they're still doing this censorship, and they're full in on it. And you have the interactions, and this is one thing I would be interested in: the interactions with the fact checkers, the interactions with media to get people to be censored, where they come in and say, "Oh, I see Kim.com tweeted this. What do you think about letting him continue to tweet despite him being an evident violation of your terms of service?" As broadly read by the Washington Post, who I'm recalling for. Though that's, to me, is going to be devastating if it comes out. And of course, the other big thing is the effort to destroy civilization by the left through the COVID shutdowns and such, and how that was affected through censorship on big tech. So I'm looking forward to all of that. I don't think any of us was expecting the Pentagon Papers today, but we got them. They were interesting.
Yeah.
But the censorship of Americans is where it's at. And, this is where if I were doing my journalism over at Twitter or investigating over at Twitter, I'd be like, I want to know who was abused, and I want to know it immediately.
So here's an interesting thing. Elon tweeted out several times now that they are going from record numbers to record numbers. More users, more engagements, more signups. This is the unique selling proposition that Twitter now has over all other big tech companies, which is we are now free speech. We are now, protecting our users. We are here to fight for you. None of the other guys are doing that. There are some smaller players, yes, they do that, but none of the big ones. And I think Twitter will see an enormous amount of growth simply because of that. And then you add on top of that all the new innovation that is going to come, all the new features that are going to come. I think the future of Twitter is bright, and I'm optimistic that I think not only will Elon recoup his investment, he's going to make this a powerhouse that will be worth much more than what he paid for it.
So, Kim, on that, I'd love to add that, this is free advertising for Elon too. I mean, this is a great strategy by him, and he doesn't have to be a politician to be a man of the people and to step forward and, basically put all this out. And he's on the news, and he's on the front page, and he's bringing people in. I also wanted to bring up a point and get the panel's opinion on this. I mean, what's happening with the FBI and the intelligence community is the same thing that's been going on for the last 75 or 100 years, where if you take the State Department, for every country in the world, even the smallest country, there's probably 200 people that are assigned specifically to that country. And many of the people, the citizens in the US, they don't know how it works. But let's say that, take the smallest country in the world, there's, say, 100,000 or 500,000 people. There's 200 people at the State Department listening to every radio station, every podcast, reading every paper, people on the ground. They know everything about those countries. And so now they've just moved that over to social media. They're doing the same thing. And then on top of that, in terms of foreign policy and what's going on in Ukraine, I mean, the US loves to have their foreign policy isolated in one country. I spent quite a bit of time in Afghanistan, and I can't, $1 trillion, I couldn't tell you where, other than some of the roads that I saw, I couldn't tell you where $1 went. You can't see it anywhere. I also spent time in Dubai several years, and I know quite a few people in the intelligence community. I know all about Project Raven. I'm sure Kim knows about that. That's where they did all the spying on the U.S. citizens from, they call it the Villa in Abu Dhabi. And, they're super tied in with the Middle East and all that stuff. But I guess from what we're seeing that's coming out on social media, it's basically just an extension, from my perspective, as to what's been going on for forever. And it's just, I think maybe the public hasn't known about it.
Yeah, thank you.
I got a little bit of breaking news here from Elon Musk. He just tweeted out, I will resign as CEO as soon as I find someone foolish enough to take the job. After that, I will just run the software and server teams.
Okay.
So
I'm okay with that.
I have something.
I mean, he just needs to find the right guy, right?
Yeah. So Ian, I have something on that too.
That will take a while.
But if
Oh yeah, it might take forever.
But if Elon really wants to piss everyone off in social media, he'll bring in all the content. He'll find a way to bring in long form and short form, video and written. And then what he'll turn around and do is give, 60, 70% or whatever amount he can give to the content creators. That all of a sudden that could basically destroy Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. All those guys will be screwed, and all the content creators will come over. So to me, that's the way to just completely destroy that Web2 monopoly, is to just flip this whole ad model. And maybe he has to charge a fee to where for everybody to use it and things like that. But I think that's what's ultimately going to happen, is when all the content creators get the majority of the ad revenue, or he starts doing different things like that really compensate people and pull them off those channels.
Well, as someone who had 250 million impressions last month, thanks largely to interactions with Musk, that would be interesting to see. But a lot of us are on there just not because of the monetization, because of the financial opportunities. But I know I'm on it because I'm trying to advance my cause and our movement and protect the Republic and support Judicial Watch. So I'm happy to be able to do that. So I'm going to try to bring this to a close. Kim and Ian and Steve and Sphinx and Saeed, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Catskill, for popping in at the last minute as well. I'm glad we were able to get it to work. I'm wondering, Kim, if there's a overseas problem with spaces as well. Now that we see that we had issues with you, and well, Tara was here in the United States, so that shouldn't have been an issue. So I'm glad this was able to stabilize enough for us to have a good discussion here. So
I think it
we'll
was very, very good that we put you in as the host, because they are too scared to touch you. You know,
You're an American, so they can't fuck with you. Yeah,
yeah,
maybe that's
well,
it.
we'll see. I'm very intimidating, I understand. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And, everyone who's listening, track this group. Any one of us could be hosting spaces at any time. And so stay tuned and stay involved. Thank you very much.
good job, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you,
Thanks, Tom.
guys. Bye.
Right.